This season of Rubble Crew brought us some of the best facial expressions from Wheeler. Like seriously, I can make a compilation of them just because of how precious they are. What's up everybody, this is Whirly. Today I'm not talking about Rubble Crew, where like I promised, I was gonna make my review of season 2 done in the summer, and so I did. Which for the most part was most of the same from season 1, encompassing some really basic storylining along with some heavy-handed filler that just come off as bland for the most part. And furthermore, on top of its very rudimentary humor, I just feel like the trajectory of Rubble Crew just mostly stayed the same in season 2, and I feel like that's gonna be the norm moving forward with its future installments. Although I did say season 1 was alright, it's still not the most outstanding in the world. Season 2 though just feels like a very wonky season where it feels like a really unnotable one where a lot of the episodes just don't come off as the most significant to me, which might be a fundamental issue with the show where it just doesn't reach a peak that makes it elegant. And after just this season, I think I'm having a fair share of opinion with many other fans and looking at this show as a pretty middling one. But it doesn't stop me from covering from this show for moving forward, because I know some people who watch my channel do watch the show, so hey, why not I cover on a show that you like watching? But anyways, before the review, I might as well talk about one major tweak that this season does, in the fact that, I guess because the showrunners knew that the animation quality from season 1 was just abhorrent, they took the job to really polish some of the animation style for this season. Although still not the greatest in the world, at least the aesthetic of the characters looked a bit better than season 1, and it is noticeable if you do pay attention to the animation style of the characters. So I will say this was a step in the right direction with this show. But likewise, in every other review, I'm going to go through every episode and share my brief opinions and thoughts along the way, and then at the end of the video, I will do a quick rating on which episode do I think is the best and worst from this season. With all this said, let's get right into it. Let's start this off with episode 1, where it revolves around the crew constructing a roller coaster. And it begins with Greatway's duck hanging out with Speedmeister's turtle, which that's such a random dynamic there. But they're playing around in a cart, and it's not really as fun as it is. So Greatway calls the pups over to make some upgrades to this cart, and they concept the idea to make a roller coaster. But of course, with Speedmeister there and hearing the potential of a roller coaster build, gets ego driven as always and builds its own version of it, which is always as bad as it is. And when the pups arrive, Speedmeister's roller coaster build is complete, which is just as unstable looking as it is. And without any sort of safety test on it, he just straight up lets Ducky and McTurtle ride his unstable roller coaster, and what do you know, things go awry and the cart detaches from the rails and the duck and turtle inside the cart rolls away, with the pups witnessing everything. And this is where I would want to acknowledge how Wheeler's face in the scene, which is going to be the last we'll see in this season, is just so amusing because it's clearly pertaining to the new animation style that Polish has modeled the most. So oftentimes this season, his expressions are what outstands me as his character, and I don't know if it's fan service or something, that because the showrunners are aware that Wheeler is such a popular character that they want to make him stand out more, which is not that bad because I love Wheeler. But I do think the expressions that he makes throughout these seasons generates a lot of amusement from me, and expect there to be a lot of clips and screenshots of it throughout this video because of how noteworthy they are. Anyways, I guess we're gonna have a rescue-esque sort of segment where the pups get in their vehicles and chase down the pets in the cart, and they pass by some familiar places before the cart rolls into the river, and Rubble would be the one that will ultimately scoop them out of it. So that issue is now done with. So let's get back to the beach where the pups create an actual roller coaster that is more stable. And another new thing that this season introduced is this recurring song called Bounce and Bill while the pups are constructing something, which to be honest, I'm mostly amused how the pups bounce around during this montage, more so than the song itself. But anyways, the roller coaster is done and everyone rides in it and has fun. That's it for the first episode. Nothing like a fine introduction to what season 2 is going to be, but for the most part, felt like the exact same of how the season 1 episodes played out, with just some minor tweaks to them to add a little bit more amusement to them. So let's move on to the next episode. We're focused on the crew building Motor a Playspace. I wonder what that's gonna be, but it starts off with them at the backyard tidying up things, pretty much trying to keep the place immaculate under Wheeler's desires, because there's an inspector named Inez who's gonna come over to make an inspection on it. And Wheeler himself is just so excited, being such a goofball as he is. But then it comes with some disaster. Motor, who casually just loves to smash anything, where we see her just smashing paint cans, and we humorously get this dramatic zoom-in shot of Wheeler's shocked face, then proceeding to say, uh-oh, because it's definitely an uh-oh situation here. Because Motor's hobby is your disadvantage to this inspection. So, the pups have an idea to call over someone to keep Motor company, and that person is a new character named Karima, who tries to occupy her from smashing things like letting her play with balloons, but then she eventually smashes them, which is unsurprising, and so she moves on to wood stacks, which looks like Jenga, and Motor continuously smashes them with Karima putting them back together, and she eventually starts tiring out, but before she can put back the stack, Motor would smash some crates that were full of magnetic objects and springs, which creates such a big mess, much to the disappointment of the pups, which I'm surprised they weren't as shocked as they could have been. But Wheeler is forgiving for Motor's misbehavior, but there's definitely a solution that needs to be done. So seeing how the springs and magnets kind of piece together itself, and it could work as a mess cleaning up itself, science right there, this gives the pups the idea that they could create Motor a play space where she can continue her famous hobby of destroying things, and she can destroy the designs, but these designs are built to put themselves back together, so a supposed mess that was made is not actually going to be a mess. So they constructed together and they finished it with Motor testing it out by destroying the design, and it works as it pieces itself back together thanks to its source of magnets. So that's cool, and what do you know? Ines arrives to make her inspection, and she pretty much checked off all the boxes with every place around the yard being clean. And that's when she passes by Motor making a mess with the new play space, and after observing the design rebuild itself, it impresses her a lot. So with that, the Barkyard passes the inspection test and Wheeler gets a gold star. Wonderful! Which Wheeler's like, I don't know what to do with it. Well, what you should be doing is celebrating, and that's what the pups do, and that's it. So now we move on to the next episode, which is called The Crew Builds a Train Station, and it starts off with the crew at the farm where there's going to be a new farm animal arriving, and Zoe confirms to them it's a cow named Maureen who's going to be delivered via train, but the problem there is the fact that the cow is going to struggle to get off the train considering the cart she's in is leveled up and there's no train station that can help safely board and exit passengers off train. And so, with that, the pups get the idea to create a train station, like that wasn't the obvious to begin with. So they go back to get their supplies, and on their way, they're passed by Carl, who's getting new ice cream flavor delivered to him, which I wonder what this delivery source is going to be. But anyways, the pups arrive back at the farm, and they build a new station, and conveniently, the train arrives, who happens to be operated by Camilla, because she knows how to deliver, and does the reveal the cart with Maureen the cow inside. And also, she does reveal that she also is delivering Carl's new ice cream flavors, which is in another cart. But anyways, now we get to some issues. Maureen, for some reason, is struggling to go down a few steps, which they're not even that high. So because of this ridiculousness, the pups decide to reconstruct the steps into a ramp, which fair because it's much more accommodative for Maureen, I guess. And to add on top of that, they decide to entertain her a bit by throwing in a disco party, which finally encourages Maureen to step down the ramp and make her way to the dance floor, which finally completes that mission. And also Camille can continue forward to deliver the ice cream to Carl. And what do you know? It was so quick that Carl came rolling up on his ice cream bike and shared his new coconut flavor to everyone. So that was sweet, and that's pretty much it. So before moving on, let's talk about my general thoughts on this episode. It's one that kind of is middle of the road, which to be fair is going to be a trend with most of the episodes this season. And this one's kind of a start to that because most of the events here just come off very unnotable to me. Like compared to the first two episodes I just talked about, there at least is more standout moments to them than what this episode could really bring. So now let's jump over to the next episode, where it describes how they built a sign for Sierra Sparkle. So it starts off with Gabriel chatting with the pups and telling them that his daughter Sierra is making her way to the town, and this excites Charger the most because we know he's her biggest fan. But Gabriel makes a request that he wants something built that will make Sierra feel welcomed into the town. So the pups concept the idea to build her a sign. So they head over to their home to get some supplies. And what do you know who was eavesdropping? None other than freaking Speedmeister once again. And of course, he tries to butt in and create his own build. And once he shows it to the pups as they arrive at the location to build their version, he just gloats about his terrible creation. And what do you know, his bill goes awry and it starts rolling through the canyon, surprisingly, and then starts making its way through town, with the pups having to chase it, like we haven't seen this so many times already. But after pursuing it, they are able to stop it just in time before it collided into the city hall. And of course, it breaks apart, much to Speedmonster's dismay. But anyways, they head back to the canyon to build their version of a sign, and it is way better, with much more cooler lighting, and is built more neat instead of lopsided like Speedmonster's would. And guess what? Conveniently, Sierra shows up and is touched by the sign dedicated to her. So, to share her appreciation, she sings a song to everyone, and that's it. Yet again, another middle-of-the-road episode, which these pair of episodes that I just talked about didn't come off as very memorable to me, where the story just felt very baseline, not giving much of note to them. And unfortunately, this episode just does not live up to any potential whatsoever. So now we continue to the next episode, which is called The Crew Builds a Mini Golf Course, which the context of the episode kind of deviates from what the title is advertising, but either way, let's get right into it. The episode starts off with the pups meeting up with Karima again, who is balancing soccer balls, and they each get a soccer ball to play with, where they're initially just going to play some soccer, and they build some soccer nets because I guess this town is so incompetent that they're so lenient on these pups. But anyways, Karima tries to coach this fun exercise where they all kick the balls at the same time to see whose soccer ball lands in the net, and when they all do, the soccer balls conveniently just disappear at the same time, which confuses everyone at first, but when they go and investigate, the culprit of the disappearances are holes in the ground, and who are the ones who made the holes in the ground? None other than some bunnies, which is done to them having to just jump out of them and start playing with the soccer balls. Seeing the bunnies wanting to join in on the game and their common moves to put the ball in the holes, it gives Karima and the pups the idea that they can make it resemble mini golf but using soccer balls instead. So the pups build a mini golf course, and some of the designs that they build are resembling the previous buildings that they actually built before, but in a miniature version of them, which is a pretty cool callback the pups themselves decided to do there. So after a little fun round they did playing mini golf soccer with the bunnies, Karima decides to invite some kids over to play as well, and they had just as much fun playing this mini golf game as well. And that pretty much ends off the episode there. And okay, now we finally get to an episode that is at least more notable, and that does stem from the cool ideas with incorporating soccer into mini golf, which I think is a lot more interesting than just having it be a standardized mini golf like the episode title seemingly promoting it as. So I think that was a better touch than what I was anticipating there, which does elevate my overall experience with this episode as well. And now we move on to the next episode called The Crew Builds a Butterfly Garden. Interesting name, but it begins with the pups and Motor, as well as Rose, playing Frisbee, which they're all having fun with. But then when Rose is about to throw the disc at them, she spots something and quickly alerts the pups to hold on, which doesn't go well, and the pups end up crashing into each other. So that was not really the best idea. But they do question her what she was trying to ask them to hold on for, and she explains that there's butterflies. A flock of them really, and they are amazed by them. But Motor in particular is fascinated by a blue-winged butterfly that lands on her nose. But because of how mesmerized they were with the butterflies and wanting them to remain in the zone they're in, they decided to build a butterfly garden so that way it can attract more butterflies to come. So they get around to building the foundation materials for the garden, as well as Wheeler getting plants from Shelly, which he pretty much emptied out his store of plants by the end of it. So as the pups are finishing the creation of the butterfly garden, Motor is just playing around with the blue butterfly before she ends up losing sight of it and starts feeling distraught. And the pups notice her and try to cheer her up a bit, and they make an attempt of using blue flowers to create a giant blue butterfly model to add to the garden. And although Motor is fascinated by it, she's still depressed that she doesn't see the real blue butterfly again. And just as she's feeling somber, the blue butterfly comes back, which excites her again, as well as the other butterflies who are now attracted by the garden and are now fluttering around it. So that was pretty cool. And with everything dealt with, that is the end of the episode. For me, it's just fine. I want to say that moments where the pups crash into each other felt like a reference to the common wipeouts that you see in the main franchise. So it felt really humorous how they made a cliche version of it on this spin-off. But outside of that, nothing else I can really take away from this episode. So then we continue on to the following episode, which is titled The Crew Built a Library Treasure Tunnel. What a strange concept that's gonna be, but the episode starts off with Gravel reading a story to the pups, which is one of their favorites, King Ponder. So then when Gravel's done reading, they decide to head to the outdoor library to read another one. But then when they look through the shelves, they already see that many King Ponder books that they previously read, which does seem to be bad news since that means they don't have a book that's fresh for them to read. But it turns out there is one more King Ponder book that they never read but hasn't been shelved yet. And that stems from the fact that there's no more room on the shelves, so the pups try to make more by expanding the height of the shelves, which does turn out to be a bad idea considering it will have some sort of impact with the bees. And even Rose has to point out to the pups, which does disappoint them, but that allows them to find a solution to all of this in that they can expand the library capacity to the underground. How interesting. So they extract a lot from the surface and create a big hole. And the first thing that they can construct inside that hole is a ramp that they also can slide down so they can make their way to the surface of it. And then after that, they mine around the walls a bit so they can add on the bricks and other sort of decorations to embellish the area, which is really nice and has some really great lighting to it, as well as obviously providing more storage for some books. So then after completion, some citizens make their way to the underground library to check it out. And we conclude the episode with Gravel reading the next edition of the King Ponder story with the pups gathered around to listen to it, which is nice to bring full circle to the beginning of the episode. So that ends the episode off, and on par with the last one, it's just fine. Not too much that can be notable from this episode, aside from maybe the construction process and the cool idea of having an underground library. But apart from that, I don't got much else to say. So then we go on to the next episode where the crew builds Rubble a super snack dispenser. And it starts off with Rubble just admiring this dog bowl full of a mountain of kibble because obviously he likes food, unsurprisingly. But then his moment of appreciation is stopped by an alert. So he alongside the rest of the pups make their way there to receive a call from Shelly, whose shop door is broken. So Rubble ends up going alone to fix it, and it turns out that's kind of a distraction that the other pups needed so he can be out of the barkyard while they work on their own sort of business, which is creating a surprise snack dispenser for Rubble. And they first install one in his home, which is cool and all, but then Gravel makes more kibbles that comes in a variety of flavors, so that means the pups need to do more work in correspondence to expanding the size of the dispenser. And because Rubble probably finished his job at Shelly's shop, they're going to need Shelly to find another excuse to keep Rubble occupied while the pups are working on the dispenser. So Shelly takes Rubble over to his home where he does some work smoothing out some things, but then at the barkyard, some disaster happens when Gravel is balancing a bevy of kibbles on a tray, and his grandkid will accidentally bump into him, causing him to collapse and drop all the kibbles on the ground. And on top of that, mixing the flavors together, so that's going to make things a lot more complicated. And when they try to contact Shelly to prolong the distraction more, unfortunately, Rubble's time with him was up and he's making his way back home. So the time is really tight at this point, and the pups are going to need to find another way. And they quickly figure out that they can just use their senses from their nose to identify the kibble flavor. So they're able to work together and do that. And they're able to tidy all the kibbles back in the bowl in the nick of time just before Rubble arrives home, where he makes his way back into his doghouse and gets a surprise by everyone with his new snack dispenser, which he is amazed by and is very appreciative for the pups building it for him. And he shares the kibble snacks with his cousins, and that is the conclusion to this episode, which was definitely a lot more interesting because it added some more suspense with the pups trying to give Rubble a surprise but needing him to not be present at the barkyard in order to make that surprise happen. And I do like the aspect where they're able to overcome the adversity that they're facing in order to reach their goal, as we see here with the whole kibble debacle when the mess with them mixed them together. So then we go on to the next episode, which is titled The Crew Builds a Hair Salon. And it begins with Grandpa baking some stuff for the pups, but during the process, he also got a lot of flour on his fur, so he's gonna need a nice wash. And what do you know? The pups get a call from the tower, and that call comes from Shelly, who now wants to open a salon. So the pups obviously agreed to build him one, and before they continue, Greatway shows up to the barkyard to announce that Gravel is going to participate in a special photo But unfortunately, like I mentioned, he's dirty with flour, so he wants his picture taken when he's clean. And with the pups happening to build a salon, there's some convenience right there, so they get to work creating the building and installing a barrel of liquid where they fill it in with shampoo inside. Which I may wonder what kind of factor it will play in this episode. We'll see. So the building process is done and Shelly arrives to express his appreciation. And then Gravel arrives to get a nice wash down, but first feasts on some cherries that Shelly feeds him. And then he makes his way into the tub where he washes up before Shelly activates the shampoo, which fills up the tub and covers Gravel's entire body, during which some pink bubbles start flowing out of the building, which should be a sign that something's up. And what do you know, after bath time's done, Shelly presents the pup Gravel's new look, and when he comes out all pink, the pups give this humorous shock reaction to seeing Gravel's new pink look, which may be bad for the sake of the picture. However, Gravel's not too mad about it. Instead, he's more amused by it when he looked at his own mirror through the reflection of the window. So the first thing the pups are going to do is solve who the culprit could be. And it didn't take long when they went around the corner of the shop that they would find it be squirrels. And of course, they let the temptation get the better of them and they start chasing after it, because please. But anyways, the main reason the squirrel caused it is because it kept dropping cherries inside of the barrel, so that explains why Grandpa's fur was dyed pink. But seeing that the squirrel was just trying to find a place to save its cherries, the crew does a side quest in building a giant wooden cherry so the squirrels can use it to store the cherries inside. And occasionally while they were building, they kept getting distracted by the squirrel and started chasing after it. But anyways, despite all the distractions, they are able to get the work done, and the squirrel now uses their new build to store its cherries in. Then afterwards, the shampoo inside the barrel is no longer going to be tampered with because there's no more cherries going inside, so Gravel can get washed for real this time. And guess what? Great Ray arrives to take the special picture of him, and when he comes out of the salon, he's still pink, much to the pup's shock, but he decides to stay that way because he likes the new look in a way. So Mr. Ducky takes his picture and now makes his way on a billboard. Not really a billboard literally, but you get the point. And yeah, that was it. It was a lot more of a comical episode, stemming from all of the fun catastrophes with Grandpa changing to pink and the usual pups being tempted to not chase a squirrel. Like, all of that is very hysterical throughout this episode. So then onwards, To the Crew builds a colorful crystal show. Okay, time to shine some light on this episode. And it starts off with the pups alongside Lily and Rose hang out at the beach before they decide to do some digging around. And what do you know? Of course they would dig up something interesting because that's what makes this town so special, which is the bevy amount of treasures that scatter around in this one town. But Lily is the one to dig up something unique, which is a rock. And when she digs it out, there is something out of the ordinary with this rock. And that's further emphasized on when Motor smashes it with her hammer, revealing some colorful crystals. So what happens next is that Motor would periodically smash a rock that would reveal the colorized incised crystal that she smashed open. And after that was done, the pups had an idea to make an exhibit of these crystals at the museum. So they make their way there and construct an area outside of the museum to try building an exhibit with the shining crystals. However, just as they're about to place these crystals on the stands they built, the climate turns cloudy, which means it deprives the crystals from its ability to shine because it relies on the sun's reflections. And since it's covered, there's no way in heck it'll be able to shine anymore, which does disappoint everyone. But then, the usual happens when Charger indirectly slips up a solution just for Mix to point out, and his response being like, "That's it, wait, what's it?" Because that's Charger for you. But his indirect proxy to Mix is that a use of an indoor light that can shine on the crystal can reflect on its lighting and allow them to glow, which lo and behold, inside the museum there are indoor spotlights. So that is great leverage the pups can use there. So they moved the heavy stands inside, which there was some humor with them struggling to move them in. But anyways, they moved everything inside. Mix pulls the lever to dim the lights and activate the spotlights that shines directly on the crystals, and boom, these colorful crystals illuminate, giving such a disco vibe to them. And the Motor brings in Lily to surprise her with this new project, and she's amazed. And they end off with a nice dance with obviously Rubble DJing, and that's it. I mean, it's an okay episode, but it just lands in the ballpark of episodes that kind of don't have much weight to them that makes them stand out. so I don't got much to talk about. So, to the next episode, and guess what? It's another crossover. Who's the pup that's joined them this time? Skye. Which, to be honest, at this point, with the order that we're going, it's not really surprising how the show is doing it, where basically, the pups on the main franchise that visits the show is in the order based on their popularity, where we obviously start with Marshall and Chase because they're the most well-revered, and then it's followed by Skye. So quite frankly, that leaves us Rocky and Zuma left, considering they are not highly regarded compared to the other three. So I definitely am starting to pick up the trend of where the show is going with these kind of crossover episodes. But yeah, enough said, let's get to the episode. So it starts off with the pups just snacking on their kibbles, and then they get a call from Rose, who's also accompanying Omar's family. Where they're all hiking in the forest, but they went off track and are now basically lost, so they need help from the pups rescuing them. And at first, Rubble's about to prepare his vehicle until Rose points out that there's no roads that connects to the forest mountain, so they think of an idea to build a lodge. But the problem is like the first one, how are they going to even get to the mountain? And lo and behold, obviously Rubble, coming from an adventure day, knows a friend who's capable of high flying. That's Skye, who flies around Builder's Cove for a bit and is spotted by none other than freaking Speedmeister, which at this point is another trend with these crossover episodes, is the fact that Speedmeister is going to make his appearance, because I guess we needed this tad lame anti-hero character to bring some sort of tension to the situation, even though he comes off cheesy about it. But anyways, she arrives at the barkyard and meets Rubble's family, and afterwards they get to work building the lodge. Which, unbeknownst to them, Speedmeister was eavesdropping and shares his plan to McTurtle that he's gonna build his own lodge, which good luck making that stable. Anyways, the pups finish their version and they call Rose to show off their new constructed project to her, and she's satisfied with it. And she, alongside Omar's kids, are excited to see Skye present there too. But then they run into another problem, is the fact that Skye's gonna need to park her helicopter, which there's no helipad at the mountain, so what are they gonna do? They're just gonna create their own and place it on the roof of the lodge. But anyways, while the pups talk about sleeping over at the mountains that night, we have Speedmeister trying to craft his own lodge project, which just falls apart quickly because that's the usual. But then he does something more egregious, which is hijacking Skye's helicopter. But the good thing is because of Skye's small size, no offense, and considering he's such a tall dude, he's unable to even fit himself on Skye's seat. So his next idea is to craft his own helicopter, which, you're about to endanger yourself a lot considering your builds never work out. And considering a helicopter is flying up high and correlating with your bad building skills, it's definitely not a safe thing to do. But obviously Speedmeister is just so egotistical that he don't recognize his own flaws. But anyways, the day becomes dawn, and as the pups are now getting ready to move the lodge, it's nowhere in sight because Speedmeister has made his own helicopter and stole the lodge so he can act as the hero in this spot. But the pups are not going to let him get away with it, so they're on hot pursuit with him, with Skye chasing him in her helicopter. So during the chase, we see the weight of the lodge starting to rain down Speedmeister's helicopter a bit, so then he instructs McTurtle to go inside the lodge and empty out the props inside to lessen the weight. And by doing that, is basically chucking them out, which thankfully the pups in the vehicle are able to catch the items. So afterwards, the chase finally ends when Speedmeister collides into a long mountain ledge, which tangles the rope to the lodge around him, dangling both him and McTurtle, who's inside the lodge. So then the pups gather around to configure a plan, and they come up with building a safety net. And as they're done, it is just in time before the rope snaps and causing both the lodge and Speedmeister's helicopter to fall. But obviously the safety net can only really fit for one of them. So thankfully, Skye reacted quickly, getting into her helicopter and saving the lodge with McTurtle inside, leaving the job of the safety net to catch Speedmeister. So then after that ordeal, it's night and Skye arrives just in time to deliver the news mountain lodge to Rose and Omar's family, and the pups come out of the lodge and greet them. And guess what? Speedmeister and McTurtle joined along for a bit, as a bit of a change of character for once. But you know what? The mission is over with, and that is the end of this episode. I don't mind it too much. I enjoy these crossover episodes, but I do feel like this one was much more of the lesser one in comparison to the other two, just because, as always, didn't really have much weight to them. Furthermore, did not really came off as memorable to me, despite how very action-packed it was. But either way, I did enjoy the episode for the most part, and I hope to see another crossover episode down the road. So then we go into the next episode titled The Crew Builds Charger a Super Bed. Interesting, them building one for each other. So it does start off with the crew getting ready to go to sleep because they definitely need it. So everyone seems to be settled in and asleep for the night. Besides Charger, because his energy is just keeping him awake and just constantly yapping, which is disrupting the sleep for his cousins. So they go and talk to Gravel about situation with Charger. And after that, this is when Wheeler starts to pick up Charger's antics. Where I guess this might be a new trend where if Charger's not present to do something like this, Wheeler will take his place. Where basically he'll just indirectly slip up the solution with Mix pointing it out and him just responding with, wait, what's it? And even Wheeler recognizes himself that he's starting to be like Charger in this spot, which was something abnormal there. But anyways, the solution that Wheeler would slip up is finding a way to wear out Charger's energy. So the pup designed their first attempt, which is basically an obstacle course where they have Charger performing, and he eventually does grow tired after a few laps, but it's just not enough to put him to sleep. So the next solution is construction sounds, which is putting him to sleep, but the problem is, which he himself would point out, is that his cousins can't just stay up all night just to make noises for him to sleep. They need to have the rest too. So now they're gonna have to figure out another way, which they then do when they see that they can just record some of their construction sounds and put it on a sound system alongside making a new bed for Charger so they can install it. That ends up being the ideal solution, and they end up surprising Charger with a new bed that they created alongside a little sound system dangling above him so he can listen to it as he goes to sleep. And so he does alongside everyone else. So that caps off the episode, and it's just fine. Not too much to the significant degree that I can really say this episode reached the peak, but I think there was some fun moments, and a very notable one is where Wheeler began to act like Charger in the spot that the pups were trying to find a solution, which that alone was just humorous, and hey, he's such a goofball, why don't we have him do that more often then? So now we move on to the next episode, which describes how the crew builds a gym. And it starts out with the pups watching Motor play in a ball pit, which as always makes me quickly guess what relevance is going to happen to this episode. So then they get a call, and it comes from Karima, who's accompanying Lily and Lucas, and she basically requests the pups to build something fun for them. So they head over there and build them a gym in such sort, where there's like balance beams and other sorts of fun exercises, where the kids are mostly drawn to the balance beam, but unfortunately for Lily, the issue is that it's a bit too high, and when she stands on it, she's pretty unsettled by the height and needs Karima to bring her down, which is kind of indicative on the pup's poor recognition on the safety that's needed, especially for the balance beams in the case someone did fall. But then that gives the pups the idea to create ball pits because they're the best sort of safety that's needed in these situations, so they get around to building the foundational structure. And then they head back to their home to collect the balls. But the amount that's inside the pool that Motor was playing in isn't enough. However, Motor reveals that there's more, where she has buried some and also has placed a lot in barrels. So now they can bring the balls to fill up the pit at the gym, and Lily gives the balance beam a go again, but she's still unable to make a landing despite there being balls inside. So the pups decide to demonstrate the fun of jumping inside the ball pit by individually participating in the balance beam, and they show off different styles, which does excite Lily more, and then she finally takes her turn and makes her landing. So that is great, and that sums up everything about this episode. But for my opinion on it, it feels fine. I do think they honed in a lot on the fear of heights, especially from Lily's perspective, but it didn't really strengthen the episode that much, and for me, it's just another episode that probably wouldn't stick to my mind as much coming out of this season. So then onwards to an episode where the pups would put on a construction show, or in other words, like a talent show basically. But it starts off with Growl breaking some treats to the pups, and then they're met with On Crane, who's skateboarding with such an excited mood because there are talented folks coming over to Builders Cove for a show. So they make their way over to the park where they meet with Great Wave. But then she gets a phone call from the people themselves, and unfortunately it's announced that they're not coming, which disappoints the pups, especially Aunt Crane, who feels very distraught after the excitement she has been expressing over the last few minutes. But then Charger, of course, indirectly gives Mix an idea when he mentions why can't they put on their own show, which is like, oh yes you can. But they do admit that they can't really recreate the talented people's performance, with Charger trying to test it out and ultimately failing, which is like, those are their moves, why don't you try your own moves, which is obviously construction related. And of course, they came to that conclusion that they could probably make some sort of talent show in related to construction. So they get things set up, and they pretty much outline their idea of how they're going to perform, but they only have one thing missing, is how they're going to finish off the show. And next thing you know, Encrate passes by and learns about what the pups are planning. So then the citizens of the town gather around for the talent show, and each pup performed their individual talent, where we start off with Rubble, basically being the narrator and announcing each performer's role. So then we get to Charger, who uses his vehicle to quickly swoop him back and forth while putting together a crate. So then after him, it's Mix's turn where she's gonna paint the crate blindfolded. So then Motor goes next and basically smashes the crate. And then next, Wheeler's turn. Yes, which his is definitely a lot cooler with him juggling balls while cleaning up the mess. And he's successful. So then it comes down to the final act, which the pups for some reason still didn't think of. So they go to the backstage to quickly figure it out. And On-Crane quickly comes and saves the day with her skateboarding skills. So the pups quickly build a roundy skate ramp just for On-Crane to perform on with her skateboarding, and everyone is impressed by her talent, and that ends off the talent show with everyone applauding the pups, and that is the end. I mean, it is a lot more interesting of an episode with the pups finding ways to adjust to the situation that they're in order to please someone like On-Crane. And this episode, while being direct, does give a nod to the overall theme of just being yourself and giving the talent you have. Like the pups here, where when they were trying to recreate the talents of the famous folks, it just didn't feel right considering it was not originally theirs. So it was better off that they show off their own sort of talents that would impress people, and they did. So then, jumping forward to the next episode, where it begins with Mix and Motor once again cosplaying or dressing up, as I would say, as Super Squirrelly, because we definitely needed that storyline again. But they're not the only ones alone in this, because they're having a play date with Lily and Lucas. So the two of them arrive at their home to play, and they head over to the backyard, and boom, it's a mess full of just fallen branches and twigs. So it looks like this is a job for the construction pups to help out, which this is definitely an appeal for Wheeler because he loves the cleanup job. But anyways, Rubble, Charger, and Wheeler arrive at the scene to tidy up the branches in the backyard. They also use some of them to construct some props for the playdate. And during the cleaning, Wheeler spots a bluebird chirping, which he's not certain why. And unfortunately doesn't get the answer because he had to get the supplies that were ready, which were the tires so that they can use for the obstacle course. And everything in the backyard is pretty much done with a well-set obstacle course for a little game that they're going to participate in. But before they start, everyone would notice the bird up in the tree feeling distraught, and only answers would be given to them when they heard baby chirps coming from the bushes, which Charger would find a baby bird. So that really confirms that the reason the bird was chirping earlier because she lost sight of her child. But now that the pups found it, they just now need to find a way to get it back into its nest. And they concept idea of building another thing, which ended up basically being a rock climbing board, where they just put together a board high enough to reach the nest and applied some rock pegs on it so they can be able to climb up on it. And Motor would do the honors of returning the baby bird back to its parent, which she was also wearing her Super Squirrely costume too, so now she feels like she's embracing that superhero mold. And even she herself recognizes that she's now a hero, which good on you. But the day turns dawn and pretty much disappointed the kids and Motor that their playdate couldn't really last long, but the pups comfort them and acknowledge that they did somewhat engage in their activity with what they did and also saving a baby bird's life. So that's at least something. So they can definitely feel the gratification for themselves, which they do, and that's the end of the episode. I mean, there are some things that I did like from this episode, but it just feels like this episode does not come off very memorable to me. Because looking through season 2 episodes, this one just doesn't come to the top of my mind at all. So it does harm how I look at the episode. Not that it's entirely bad, but it was also something that doesn't really leave a significant mark on the season as well. So then our next episode is called The Crew Builds a Smoothie Shop. And our setting begins at the roller coaster. Nice little callback to the first episode, but anyways, the pups were just running some errands there. And then after observing how much dehydration people are feeling, they have the idea to find a solution where they can have drinks served to people. And they do spot a overheated Carl just sitting on the sideline, where they do approach him, and he technically is supposed to be serving ice cream, but the ice cream shop is closed since all his ice cream is sold out, which that's pretty much is what happens when the day is just so heated. But hey, guess what? Carl was sitting under a coconut tree, and they obviously had drinkable, so it gives everyone the ideas that Carl could open up a smoothie shop. So they go around to build this little tiny stand, and Carl will just make his way up on a ladder to grab a coconut so he can make the smoothie flavor. And the pups are obviously his first customers, and they enjoy it, which makes him glad that his new business is working out, so he's gonna make more. And after it's done, the pups opt to serve it to Omar's family. But then catastrophe strikes, where because the coconut trees are located so close to the roller coaster rails, its commotion would cause a multitude of coconuts to drop from the trees. And it coincidentally happen when the pups are about to serve the drinks to others. But yeah, it's raining coconuts, which the pups have to dodge. But Charger is the one that gets unlucky because he accidentally starts rolling onto one of them and collides into the other pups like bowling pins, and they all drop their drinks on the ground. Whereas after this little catastrophe, it's going to be a struggle for Carl to really run this movie business if stuff like this is going to happen. But then Charger takes note of the swirly straw that Carl is using, which gives Mix the idea that they could recreate a larger one for the shop, like a tube. So in that way, whenever a coconut drops from the commotion of the roller coaster, it'll land inside the tube and go through the funnel where Carl can collect them inside his shop so he can use them to make his smoothies, which adds to more convenience there. So he doesn't have to like go up and down on a ladder to collect the coconuts. They can just be given to him automatically. So now Carl goes back to making smoothies once again, and the pups are successful in serving them to everyone, which they do enjoy the drinks, and then they go on the roller coaster to have fun, which ends off the episode there. And I'm alright with this episode. It was kind of tense with that whole dramaticness with the showering coconuts. Then to the next episode where the pups are ready to celebrate Charger's birthday. Well, we had Motor first, now Charger. But this time it starts off with every pup but Charger at the tower where they're in contact with Charger's favorite celebrity, Sierra, where she's gonna be present at his birthday party too, alongside the pups planning to locate it at the roof of the dinosaur museum. So that'll make things interesting. But their only hurdle is to avoid spoiling the surprise with Charger, since some of the props they're gonna have requires construction, and with Charger present at the barkyard, it's definitely gonna make things a little bit difficult. And even Charger himself is so excited as well. And this curiosity does peak throughout the episode, when the pups occasionally have close calls with Charger catching them, but Rubble is the only one to keep him away during the whole procedure. And you may wonder, what were they building? Well, they constructed some dinosaur stands and even one that bounces like a bounce house. So then after that, they bring their props to the museum, but then they have one issue like they always have, which is I guess they didn't do the measurements properly. Some of the props can't really fit through the museum entrance. So then they try to figure out a solution, and guess what? Wheeler pulls a Charger again, where he indirectly slips out the solution, this time being of crafting a lift. So they build it, and after they're finished, Rubble gets a call from Charger, who is on his way to the museum. So, looks like the pups have got to scurry to get everything up on the roof before Charger arrives, and he do it on time. As Charger arrives with no one present but a sign telling him to go on the lift, he makes his way up, and boom, he gets a surprise party, as expected. And on top of that, Sierra is joining in as well, so Charger can enjoy his birthday more significantly. So that closes off the episode, and I'm cool with it. I don't mind these like birthday episodes, but you know what? With now Motor and Charger getting one, can Wheeler get one next? I would really want that. So next up, we have an episode where the crew builds a Ferris wheel. Okay, we're definitely going to start making an amusement park at this point. But anyways, it starts off with the pups actually meeting up with Gabriel, where they hang out a bit with him sorting out his shop before they bring him along for a day at the beach. They make sandcastles with him, plays frisbee with the pups, drink some smoothies that Carl is making, which is a nice callback to the smoothies episode not too long ago. But then we get to the final part, which is the roller coaster, and the pups go in, but Gabriel just hesitates and decides not to go on without the pups' knowledge. And it's not until they finish the ride that they finally notice that Gabriel was not on the ride with them, and he's also nowhere to be seen, which finally, if they just walked around for a bit, they would have found him. But they decided to take it to the extreme by trying to recreate a bird's eye view, and by doing that is using Charger's crane to lift up each pup to get a higher view. So Rubble goes first, and because the angle he's looking at is at the town, he doesn't spot Gabriel. Then Mix goes next, and her angle, she's not able to spot Gabrielle as well. But then when it comes to Wheeler, where his angle looks at the boardwalk, he spots Gabrielle just sitting on a bench. And then Charger just stupidly takes off along with the pups, forgetting that Wheeler is still dangling from his crane, and even Wheeler has to call out Charger for forgetting to put him down, which is kind of funny. And you know what? How dare you, Charger, for attempting to abandon Wheeler? You're probably just jealous because Wheeler's the only character that's actually bringing a lot to the table on the show more than anyone else. But anyways, let's get back to the main story. So the pups meet up with Gabriel at the bench and confront him on what happened, and he shares that he just didn't like riding roller coasters, which is highly reasonable. But the pups still want to try and give something special for Gabriel's day at the beach, so it's time to build a new ride, and this time it's a Ferris wheel. So they constructed, and after completion, Gabriel rides the Ferris wheel with the pups, which he enjoys more because Ferris wheels are a lot more slower, not fast-paced like roller coasters, so the motion level definitely isn't as full throttle like roller coasters are. And there it concludes. So to summarize how I think of this episode, it was a lot more interesting. It's nice to see some characters actually get more to shine in these these episodes because then we can get some development from them as well. Even though what I just said isn't as significant in this episode, but still, it's nice enough that the pups had some time to hang out with Gabrielle in this episode and made his day at the beach very special as well. So to the next episode, which is called The Crew Built a Farm Animal Yoga Space. What is going on here now? But anyways, it starts off with Karima visiting the pups to give them some yoga lessons. Then they get a call from the tower, so they head over there to answer, and it is from Zoe, who's calling because her animals are acting haywire. Which I want to point out is how we get this brief reconnection with Truffles and Wheeler's relationship, where Wheeler grosses concerns on if Truffles is okay. So that really was something. But anyways, the reason these animals are going crazy is because the roof of the barn is falling apart. So the pups make their way there so they can fix it. So they arrive and go ahead and mend the roof, with Wheeler finally organizing the roof pieces. And after they're done, with the farm animals also being kept inside a pen, Wheeler opts to lure them out and bring them back into the barn. But while he's guiding them back, he's also walking backwards, and he accidentally backs into a stack of buckets, which knocks down and startles the animals, making them act crazy again, and it exceeds to the level where they all jump into Charger's vehicle and start operating it maniacally. So Charger jumps onto the front to try and reach for his controls, and he manages to and stops all the chaos before it could get worse. With the animals now acting so maniacal, the pups figure a solution to get Karima involved because she was having them practice yoga earlier, and yoga is a relaxing exercise, so she could try that with the farm animals. So she's invited over alongside the pups, building a space just for them. And after everything, Karima arrives and hosts a nice little yoga session with everyone, and this is able to meditate all the farm animals, which allows them to steadily head back to their barn and sleep, which with that the job is done. So before moving on, let's talk about this episode. It's just another one that's fine, but also is one that felt like the tension was a bit contrived at points. So yeah, those were really my brief thoughts on this episode. So then to the next one, where it begins with the pups being up early to watch the sun rise, and then they get a call from Greatway, who acknowledges that it's the anniversary of the day that she befriended Mr. Ducky, so she wants the pups to create something that's special for him, and they come to the idea of building a diving board. So they make their way to a pond where they take all the materials they have to start building one, but then periodically, some of their materials start going missing, like the screws and boards, which the situation does get very sketchy with how these stuffs just randomly vanishing as soon as the pups are not looking. And finally, they do confront someone like Crunchy the beaver, because obviously he's prone to causing trouble like this, but he denies, and the pups request Crane to deliver some boards, and as she delivers them, we see some wings takedown, which clearly the viewers know it belongs to Ducky, but the pups don't know that. And it's only then when the pups have had enough of this mystery that they're gonna try and spot the culprit themselves, so they hide behind a stack and stay quiet despite Charger almost blowing their cover. And after waiting, they eventually catch their culprit in the act, who was trying to take some screws, and that's none other than Mr. Ducky. So they confront him on why he did such a thing, and it turns out he was trying to make a bench for Greatway because he wanted to give her a special surprise too. And props to him for at least trying, even though the build wasn't really stable, as we see Charger try to test it out, only for the board under him to collapse. So the pups opt to help build his surprise as well alongside Greatway's, and they combine the bench alongside the diving board together so that both surprises are in one design. And after that's done, Greatway and Ducky are blessed with the special gifts they had for each other, and they sit on a bench to really embrace themselves, and that's it. You know, this episode at least had a little more intrigue because of the whole mystery aspect of it, which is something that I am always invested in. So the narrative of this episode was definitely something that favored what I like, and hope to see more of that for the rest of this season. Then continuing on to the crew builds a rainwater tank, and it starts off with the pups at Zoe's farm again, and it happens to be raining, which actually works to the convenience of Zoe because she needs rainwater to help grow her crop, which is good initially until she checks the forecast that the rest of the week will be sunny. So that's pretty disappointing. But then Charger, as always, slips up the solution where they could just try and find a way to save up the rainwater so they could put it to better use later on, which that leads to the idea of making a rainwater tank. So they get the supplies they need to make it, and they're complete. Just like that, which is obviously taking place in the middle of the episode, so there's going to be something that's going to happen, which, what do you know? Something happens, and it turns out the farm chickens made their way into the surface of the water tank, which that alone is really bad since there's no way back up unless you have a lift, and also the tank hadn't even filled up with water yet, so there's no leverage for the chickens to have in this spot. So now we're getting to another rescue mission. So they try to use a box to lift the chickens out, but then thunder startles them. So that method is not working out at the moment. And also, considering Charger has to blindly maneuver the box around in the tank, only relying on Wheeler and Rubble's guidance is definitely something that requires a lot of good communication and teamwork to ensure everything is done right. So after a brief struggle, Charger is able to get the box to reach its surface and collect 2 of the 3 chickens. So the 2 chickens are brought out, and then the pups are trying to rescue the last chicken, who's acting way more crazy than the other 2. So then they concept an idea of placing Rubble in the box where he's holding chicken feed in his head so he can lure the last chicken to him, and he successfully does so, with the chicken also sprinting up high onto his head, and they bring it out so all the chickens are saved. But there was a brief attempt for the chickens to make their way back up the water tank, but everyone quickly catches them. So to ensure the same situation doesn't happen again, the pups add on a cover onto the water tanks that has tiny holes in them so that it can only allow rainwater to pass through, and also avoid the chickens from falling in. So then the rain gets heavy and everyone makes their way inside the barn, and they shelter themselves there as the tank fills up with water, and that is the end of the episode. So with that, it's another one that's just fine. Well, truthfully, the pups do need to be more careful with some of their builds because situations like this is prone to happen. So the next time they do something like this, they better craft some safety precautions to avoid repeating history. Now we go to the next episode, which is titled The Crew Builds a Ballpark. And also in this episode, we're featuring a celebrity in the show. His name is Aaron Judge, who is actually based on the real-life baseball star himself, which is pretty cool, but I personally didn't know who he was. But anyway, we start off with, what do you know, the pups playing baseball themselves. What a freaking coincidence. But then Aaron Judge himself arrives at Boulder's Cove, which the pups are stoked by. And some of the Builders Cove citizens greet him, and he also gets in touch with his own dogs who are named Gus and Penny. But with what he was doing, that he was going somewhere for a big game, but he got some unfortunate news from his dogs that the road has been closed off. So unfortunately, he can't make his way to the game, but the crew opt to help him out so he can still have his own baseball game. So they go ahead and build a ballpark for him. So they build it like a stadium, and everything is set up very quickly so that Aaron Judge can settle himself alongside the spectators. So Aaron's about to begin his home run derby, but a pitcher is needed, and guess who it is? Speedmeister. Which, why was he selected? He is so bad. I don't know if it was intentional because they want to find a way to give Aaron an easy win, and because Speedmeister sucks at everything, he would just pitch awfully, and what do you know? He does so. Aaron Judge is able to make home runs after home run after home run, which does so for 99 times. But after his latest swing, his bat snaps apart. Fortunately for him, he's surrounded by construction pups, so they can just build him a new bat. And they create one just in the nick of time before Speedmaster makes his 100th pitch. And what do you know? Aaron Judge makes his 100th home run, so he's definitely had an accomplishment there. And the pups give him a group hug alongside his own dogs, Gus and Penny as well. So that is a satisfying way to end it all. I mean, it is definitely a much more intriguing episode, and it's interesting when we get an actual adaptation of an actual celebrity in real life. I mean, I'm personally not a baseball fan, so I'm not familiar with much, but I can see the values of who Aaron Judge is and his specialty, so that's cool. Going forward to the following episode, where it describes how the crew builds a surf bridge? Well, we start off with the pups just grabbing a few wooden planks until they pick up one that's shaped as a surfboard with some decals on it. And guess who it happened to belong to? Aunt Crane, which now she shares another part of history to the pups where she used to surf the seas as well. Which, I mean, considering she's a skateboarder as well, it's not really surprising that she's prone to do these sorts of activities. But anyways, this all inspires the pups to engage in surfing themselves. So they grab a few wooden planks to carve into the shape of a surfboard, which they do get help from Grandpa Gravel. And after that, they paint their respective surfboards with the decal that perfectly symbolizes each of their character qualities. Rubble's board having kibbles on it because he loves food. Charger's painting of a lightning representing his energetic qualities. Wheeler's details of bubbles that emphasizes his love for cleaning, and obviously Mick's, whose details represents her creativity. So with the surfboards complete, the pups make their way to the beach so they can surf the seas. But that's when they hit a big hurdle, and it's the fact that the sand is super hot and scorches their feet when they make contact with it. So the pups try to find various solutions to getting across the hot sand. Charger tries to speed across it, but that didn't work. So then Mick tries hopping on the giant rocks on the side, but there was just not enough to reach the shore, so her plan didn't work. Then Wheeler tries to use sandals, but that didn't work either, and he ultimately gives the best reaction to burning his paws, because Wheeler has the best expressions in the show. Duh. So after a while, they finally come to a solution where they can make a surf bridge, which is basically a bridge filled with water so it can lead them straight into the sea. So they get to building it, and when they're complete, they use Mix's machine to pour water onto it. And just as they're about to surf down on it, they are joined by On Crane, who's also joining in on the fun. So they make their way surfing across the surf bridge and making their way to the sea where they can truly enjoy their surfing experience. So yeah, what a great time they had there. Anyways, for my thoughts on this episode, it was another one that was interesting. I mean, the whole plot with the hot sand was definitely something interesting. I mean, I'm the kind of person who rarely goes to beaches, so I'm not really familiar with this kind of stuff. So yeah, that plotline really intrigued me. So anyways, to the next episode where it's called The Crew Builds a Reuse It Station, which I do see that prior to this episode, people were expecting Rocky to make an appearance, which I mean fair because there's obviously rubbish involved and usually he's the kind of pup that is suited perfectly to conquer messes like this. But I personally didn't think he was going to, especially considering the title of the episode and the description obviously. But ironically, Rocky would finally make an appearance later on in the season, just not this one. But anyways, let's get back to this main story. So the episode starts off with the pups arriving at the beach and they're dashing their way towards the shore, but then they all suddenly crash into each other, which at this point, are they learning a lot from Marshall's antics after his visit in Builder's Cove? I could see that as a possibility. But anyways, the reason all that happened is because there's pylons in front of them and they meet up with Rose there and she shows them a huge mess of garbage on the beach. So the pups go to clean up the mess. But they do see the necessity in some of the garbage where they could be reusable, and that's when Mix comes with the idea that they can build a reuse it station. But unsurprisingly, Speedmeister is also eavesdropping, so of course he's gonna try and chip in his ways. And that's by creating his own reuse it sort of machine. He tried to test it out with every piece of garbage that was tidied up at the beach, and what do you know, his machine goes haywire and blasts all pieces of garbage into the town like it's raining garbage, which gives the pups a shock. And when Rose presents them the mess on her tablet, it gives Wheeler such a distraught feeling considering he always wants things neat. But his cousins do comfort him and they all work together to clean up the mess around Builder's Cove. And after they do it, they decide to use the garbage to create the reuse it machine, which is a very cool touch they are doing it. And the way they build it is first mushing them into blocks and then putting them together like bricks and then flattening littered cans to create the roof, which was interesting. And once they put them all together, Mix paints over it so there wouldn't be anything noticed of it when people see it at first glance. So now that they're done, they're gonna test it out and they use a dirty glass jar that Speedmeister was looking at, and their machine works perfectly, making the jar more neat again and reusable. And the pups put a flower in it and give it back to Speedmeister, who admires the good work there, and that is pretty much it. So for my brief opinions, I just found it very decent, but not too much to a significant degree that makes me think of this episode as a true standout from this season, considering not really much has been a standout from this season at all, which is really telling by the quality of the episodes. And this episode just unfortunately lands in a similar caliber. So jumping forward to The Crew Builds a Duck Bridge, oh god, and it starts off with the characters at the backyard just relaxing in their own homes. But then we have Grovel and Motor passing by with Motor walking like a duck, which perplexes the pups, and that's only when they find out that there are baby ducklings at their home. Where is their mother? That's totally not responsible. But anyways, considering we all know Motor loves ducks, she goes into her home and dresses herself in a duck costume. Alright, and because of her costume, it attracts the baby ducklings to follow her, and so she takes the lead, waddling like a duck, and her cousins follow her along too, doing duck walks, which that is alone is such an awkward visual. And they just go ahead and pass through the town, crossing roads, interacting with the carousel, and then making their way through the forest, where the next procedure is to cross the river. And we have Rubble try to use a log, but then it falls in the river and he almost falls in with it. Which I like how the scene is interlaced with him seeming to have fallen in only to be shown that Mix caught him just in time. So that's when we finally get to the part where they build the duck bridge. And what do you mean by that? It's just literally bridge, but the design of it has some duck features on it, so the name can sound more appropriate. So they cross the bridge and finally arrive at the pond where they return the baby ducks. But then when they go back home, the baby ducks are back there, which that is super fishy, so they just do the whole duck walk once again, which felt so unnecessary. But anyways, they arrive back at the pond and return the ducks once again, and it pretty much cuts to them being exhausted at this point. So they decide to relax themselves by snacking on some kibbles, which Rubble dispenses from his super dispenser. Nice callback to that episode. But then the pups get a shock of their life when the baby ducklings once again appear at their home, and they seem to be attracted by Grandpa Gravel, who only then reveals that he was carrying a bag of duck feed. But since the ducks do seem to like those stuff, the pups decide to build a dispenser for the ducks themselves, and they create one just for them, and it's designed like a duck, and they bring it over to the pond. So in that way, the ducks can stay around their pond, as well as snacking on some food that they like with a dispenser there. So that was a way to solve that issue. So with my takeaways on this episode, oh my goodness. I mean, no offense because it is a kids show, so I know things like this will happen. But that visual with the duck walk sequence just came off so cringy to watch. And that took up a percentage of this episode, which did not make my experience the greatest in the world. Not that the entire episode is bad, because I did like certain aspects of it, but it still did not make it excel to a significant degree. And I do think this episode is just overall not one that I'm too fond of. Okay, to the next episode, which is called The Crew Builds a Pizza Parlor. And I bet you this is something that is such an appeal to Rubble because he loves food. So we have Great Way meet with the pups, who is letting him know that Carl is going to be making pizzas for a lot of people, including them. Where the pups do get in contact with Carl as well. But then when Mr. Ducky presents a list, which Wheeler will point out a very long list, and that's obviously too much for Carl to do, so Mix comes up with the idea that they can build a pizza parlor with multiple ovens. So the pups get to work. But yet again, Speedmeister is eavesdropping and wants to chip in as always. And lo and behold, he invents his own pizza making machine, which has a spinning wheel of pizza paddles, and he tries to show it off to the pups, which of course the invention goes crazy and starts flaying pizzas all over town and even launches Speedmeister onto the top of a building. Like at this point, he should just give up and practice instead of just trying to be a show off. So anyways, the pups rescue him and they get back to the pizza parlor business where they plan to design a giant pizza to represent it. And also they decide they're going to help Carl make a giant pizza. So they first build the parlor, then they start straightening out the giant dough, add the marinara sauce, and then a giant piece of cheese that they grate, and then lastly adding the toppings to then oven it. So after that, the giant pizza is ready to serve, and all the citizens get to enjoy it along with the pups. So that was pretty pleasing. But anyways, this one was fine. Just the typical average plotline involving Speedmeister and his failed inventions, which just gets old every single time. And at this point, I'll wonder if there's ever going to be an invention that he's actually successful in that doesn't go maniacal. We'll just have to see. I mean, I don't think it's possible, given how much he just sucks at everything. Okay, now going forward to the crew built an airport road. So it begins with the pups playing at the mini golf course. Nice callback to that episode. Or just a reminder they're using soccer balls to score on the hole alongside being assisted by some bunnies. And then they get a call from Great Way, who basically requests the pups help to build a new roadway that can make the path to the airport much faster, since the only road that goes to the airport swirls so many times, which is like, why was there only one path all the time? Dang, this place is so incompetent. But hey, the pups plan out that they can try and build a new roadway through the canyon, which I mean, why wasn't it built to begin with? But anyways, they're gonna do it. But just as they're leaving to get supplies, Speedmeister yet again is listening in and wants to be the hero. So he wants to build his own roadway, and before he proceeds, he briefly interacts with the mini golf course, taking one of the soccer balls and just dribbles it, which is like, that's not a basketball, what are you doing? And then of course he lands a shot inside the hole, which is like, dude, you freaking cheated. And even the bunny looked so perplexed by what he did. But anyways, the pups get their materials and they arrive at the canyon where Speedmeister actually made it there first and already built his road, which looks so bumpy and unsafe because this guy just never checks how unsafe his inventions are. So then the first people who actually take it are Omar's family, because they were actually the ones that needed a faster way to the airport since they need to catch their air. But unfortunately, they did not know what danger they were about to put themselves in, considering the road was made by Speedmeister, and what do you know, they start swerving all over the road thanks to the bumpiness of it. And that is not helped by the fact that their car knocks down a barrel that pours slippery substance all over the road, making things more worse. And this gets to a point where Sea Meister has gone really too far, as he's now endangered the life of a family. Where's the police station when you need it? Take this guy to freaking jail. And just then, Rubble and his crew arrive as well, just to witness all the mess. And Speedrunner tries to be the do-gooder here, attempting to fix all of it, only to get himself into the mess as well, and causing his vehicle to slide off and basically crash on top of a boulder. But anyways, the crew saves Omar's car, and then they get around to tidying up the mess alongside building a proper road that is more smoother and less dangerous to drive on. And Omar's family arrives at the airport just in time before their airplane took off. So that was definitely a success. And Greatway arrives to give her appreciation for the pups. And before the episode ends, Speedmeister arrives expressing his disbelief, which is like, you can't do anything right, dude. But yeah, I wouldn't put this episode to much high regard, because it stems from how annoyed I was with Speedmeister's carelessness, and it got to the point where he not only put a family in danger, but they also involved children too, which goes to show how idiotic he comes off as. And even then, the episode wasn't really that remarkable to me either. So yeah. So anyways, to the next episode, where it describes how these dogs would build an indoor skydiving center, where it begins with Rubble inside the city hall with Greatway, where she shows him some pictures of when she was skydiving before and wants to do it again with Mr. Ducky. So she invites Rubble alongside his cousins to come along to watch her skydiving, and Camilla has the plane ready to take off. But then there's an issue. A huge gust of wind is blowing way too strong, and Ducky's parachute starts to get blown away, carrying him along with it, which the pups try to save him, but ultimately the wind outmatched their strength, and that little duck is just now being carried away in the sky. So the pups are on pursuit to save him, and they pass by some places before Ducky finally makes a stop when his parachute gets caught on the giant ice cream, which is obviously above Carl's shop. So they're able to bring him down and return him back to Greatway, but ultimately due to the strong wind, it is way too risky to really skydive. So the pups concept a solution that the two can still do some cool skydiving tricks, but they can do it indoors and safer on the surface, which is obviously an indoor skydive. So they go ahead and build it. And afterwards, the bear and Ducky test it out, and it's working, and they do some cool tricks, and then they invite the pups along to do some cool tricks too, which they obviously do. And then Greatway grabs a camera to take a selfie of all of them, and now the picture is framed on the wall in the city hall, so that was neat. And Rubble, being the only one there, is admiring it, alongside a little fun visual of Mr. Ducky just juggling some bowling pins while jumping on a trampoline. Alright, but anyways, what are my takes on this episode? It's just fine. I mean, it's just gone really repetitive with that whole storyline of just saving a character who's either rolling away or like flying away. So yeah, got nothing else to say. Now to the following episode, which is finally another one that centers on Wheeler. Yes. So Wheeler is waking up super excited because he's going to have another ice rink routine with his buddy Truffles. That's going to be one wonderful show if everything was going to pan out well, which unfortunately doesn't. As the pups arrives at the farm with a very distraught Zoe and Truffles, because the ice rink that Truffles and Wheeler were going to use has melted into a puddle. I can't believe you, weather. How could you ruin such an exciting day for Wheeler and Truffles here? But anyways, Rubble reassures Truffles that the crew's never going to give up, so they're going to find a solution. And what do you know, when they're passing by the skate park where On Crane is just skateboarding there, they take some observations before they notice the rollers on her skateboard, and that gives them an idea that they could alternate Wheeler and Truffles' routine into roller skating. So they craft some nice roller skates for the pair, and they invite Zoe and Truffles over to the skate park to check it out, and they're pretty amazed by it. So Wheeler and Truffles puts on the skates, and they try rolling around in the skate park, which unfortunately does not really suit for them that well, as we see here some of the obstacles and slopes are really difficult to maneuver, and one of the ramps causes Truffles to literally roll off and launch into the air. But Rubble, with some quick reflexes, gets in his vehicle and saves Truffles with his dozer blade. So with that, yeah, the skate park is not really the most convenient for them to perform in. So as always, Chargers would give away the solution once again, and this time that would be them alternating the rink at the farm into a roller rink, which is way more suitable for roller skating. So the pups head back there and renovate that area into a roller rink, so Wheeler and Truffles can truly settle themselves in. But before they start the routine, Wheeler pauses for a moment, and adds on that they need music because duh, if you're gonna have a disco ball above, at least add some tune to the scene. So of course Rubble is gonna be the one to do it because he's a DJ, alright, and Wheeler and Truffles do the routine once again, just in skates this time, and as always we finish it off with a dramatic air spin from Truffles, which tops off the performance there. So that was another really wonderful show from the two. Okay, yeah, I love the episode because, come on, Will gives so much to the show that we need an episode that centers around him. So we got that with this one. And I'm absolutely satisfied, both from that front and the storyline with this episode, which was very interesting too. So then, our next episode is called The Crew Builds a Bowling Alley. Okay, it starts off with the pups just playing with some balls, but then Charger tries to grab a rusty bowling ball, but is unable to lift off the ground, and that's when it rolls over right into Grandpa Grovel's paw, because they happen to find his lucky bowling ball. Because obviously he used it to play bowling with, and he demonstrates an example of that by bowling into some paint cans. So then Gravel leaves, and the crew figures that they want to find a safe place to place the bowling ball at, and what better place than to be a new bowling alley that they can build. So they go over to Gravel and let him know that there's going to be a surprise for him, and they almost slip up, which thankfully Grandpa did not pick up on. So anyways, Rubble and his crew make their way to an empty lot to build the bowling alley, and then they're pretty much done, just like that. And the set looks really nice inside. So then we get to the climax, where the pups decided to place the bowling ball on top of a box with a piece of plank placed on it. And then Charger, who is right next to it, is expressing his excitement to show the surprise to Grandpa Gravel that he dashes around the box crazily, which the commotion causes the bowling ball to roll down and the pups having to chase after it. And we get this little ridiculous pursuit where the bowling ball will just pass through some places before it reaches its stop at the barnyard, and none other than finding its way into the most disastrous position it can be, right underneath the crusher. And guess what? It activated it itself. So the crusher does its job and basically mashes it into pieces, which is obviously just bad now. But you know, there is a way to fix it. So the pups just go ahead and glue the bowling ball back together and then do a little makeover of it as well. So the aesthetic of the bowling ball is also not rusty too. And their makeover job was pretty well done. The bowling ball looks well embellished and the pups are ready to put it back in the bowling alley. But then they're almost caught once again by Grandpa Gravel, who I guess for some reason couldn't see Rubble rolling away the bowling ball, even though he was such at a far distance that it was possible to catch what he was doing. But anyways, the pups make their way back to the bowling alley and they build a stand for the bowling ball alongside placing it on a cushion so it won't roll away easily. And then that's when Gravel stumbles upon the bowling alley building and the pups give him the surprise. So they invite him in and he checks out the place before he spots a bowling ball that he believes resembles his lucky bowling ball, only for the pups to confirm that it is and that there was a makeover involved because of an accident it had. But Gravel was very appreciative of what they did, and so he uses it to bowl and he gets a strike. Good on him. At least he didn't suffer a spare like Pistol Pete Whipple did. But anyways, before the episode closes off, Gravel scares the pups a bit about his bowling ball going missing, only to reveal that it was a prank he pulled on him and that it was really just in his pocket. Wow, dude. But anyways, it's just an alright episode. I mean, definitely gives us a lot more of a backstory on Grandpa Gravel's end, since we've been kind of barraged with too much of like on Crane's side of things and sorts. So it's good enough to see something from his side for once. Moving forward to the crew builds a Superbloom bridge. Like, what is going on here? But anyways, the episode starts off with Lily, Motor, and Rose exploring a field of flowers that haven't bloomed yet. But then Lily in Motor's curiosity drags them into the middle of the field where Rose has to follow them. But they do finally see the first bloomed flower and they are amazed by it. And what do you know? The rest of the flowers in the field start experiencing a super bloom. And although all of them are pretty, this also leads to the issue that the three of them are now basically stuck because the bloomed flowers has now blocked off the exit. So what a disaster that was. But anyways, we cut back to the main pups who are just playing games involving parkour on boxes and pretending the ground is goo and mud. We humorously have Wheeler almost falling off the box and even admitting that if it was pretend, falling down is not an option. So then they get a call from the tower, so they make their way there, and the call comes from their fellow cousin, Motor, who's obviously with Rose and Lily because they're all trapped in a field of big flowers, so they're gonna need the crew's help with rescuing them. And so the crew makes their way there, and Now there's a bigger problem there. Obviously the three are stuck in the middle of the field, but the pups who are outside the field can't see them as well. And on top of that, even with a bird's eye view, they're not going to be able to be spotted. So their only way to really get close to them is if they can hear the sound of one of their voices, which Rose opts to use hers to draw over the pups to her direction. And on top of that, a solution involving construction that can work for this is building a bridge. Like, that was not the most obvious. So while they build a bridge path along the field, they continue to have Rose's voice attract them to the direction that they're supposed to go. And although there are some curves along the way, it still works out to their favor, and they would eventually find where the three are at. So they lift them all out, and everyone takes a moment to really glance at the scenery of the flowers, which they get this good view thanks to the bridge. So to make the job done, the pups finish up the remainder of the bridge, and that right there is where the episode closes off, which was just fine. I mean, cool, a rescue mission, but really just doesn't do much for me in terms of how much I really enjoyed this episode. Okay, next, the crew celebrates Builders Covegiving, basically their version of Thanksgiving. So this is going to be a Thanksgiving themed episode. And it starts off with the pups at the barkyard just setting up and prepping to celebrate the holiday. And then they get a call from Greatway, who also goes and wishes them a happy holidays. Then she starts riding on her motorcycle and passes by many citizens who then join her along on their way to the barkyard. So then over there, as the crew gets all the tables set, Mayor Greatway alongside the rest of the citizens make their way into the barkyard to spend the holiday at. But the big downside is the fact that the table that the pups have set is not big enough for everyone to sit at. So their idea is to make a super long table and locate it in front of the city hall. But you know what? Of course we're going to add a bit of more intensity to this, and that involves Speedmeister, who decides to sabotage everyone by blocking up the barkyard exit. Like, seriously, this is a different side of him that doesn't feel like he's trying to outmatch the pup's skills, but more so just kind of sadistic here, like he's seeking revenge after the amount of times the pups basically making him look like an embarrassment. And of course, everyone in the pups are quick to see what happened, but thankfully, because Motor's there, where she's good at smashing through concrete, she's able to break through this blockage and free up the exit again. And then we just have Speedmeister and his turtle just sitting in a tiny table alone in front of the city hall, intending to celebrate the holiday like this. But it was short-lived as the pups arrive and basically call them to get the heck out because they're going to be building a super table. And so they do, alongside setting up some decorations. And even when Speedmaster confesses why he did such a thing, the pups decide to invite him over for the celebration dinner as well because they are kind-hearted. So he joins in alongside everyone else at the table to celebrate this holiday. And everybody pretty much feasts on the food that they brought to the table. So that was nice. And that is it. So it isn't that bad, but I really think this episode reached much of that peak. So it's just more so another pretty average episode where it's pretty much about everyone celebrating Thanksgiving. So then onwards to the next episode, which is titled The Crew Builds a Rocket Ship Ride. And it's another episode that takes place at night, where Charter Wheeler and Rubble are admiring a full moon and begin howling on it, but then they hear a different sort of howl, which, come on, you should clearly know it's mixed because she's not with you guys, and they see her rocking in a cardboard box that she clearly designed like a rocket. So then her cousins confront her on what she's doing, and she basically tells them that she's admiring the scenery of the full moon because it's her dreams of basically giving it a paint over because she has a lot of artsy vibes to her. So with that, the pups get the idea that they want to try making Mix's dreams come true, and by doing that, they could build a new ride that involves the design of rockets and a moon, which Mix is a pro for it. So the pups make their way to the beach to build this new ride, and they start off with the foundational structure and the rocket rides that are attached to it, and all that's left is the moon, which when they constructed the sphere, it's very bouncy. But anyways, Mix is about to have her dreams come to reality and paint it, where the pups express their excitement and howl. But for Charger, who is operating his vehicle where its claw is holding onto the moon, when he howls, he accidentally stumbles and pushes the lever that releases the sphere, causing it to bounce around. Okay, at least it's more better than just the rolling away since we've just been seeing that way too many times. But still, this is no different. We're just getting this shoehorn storyline of the pups chasing something that is traveling haywire around town. But anyways, the thing bounces around and surprises some citizens who are awake that night. But then the pups corner it and cement is squirted on it to prevent it from bouncing any further, completely making it solid. Which then Charger expresses his apology for causing this mess and that now a new moon has been made. But then Wheeler points out that moon has those craters, and because the cement indirectly made those on their moon, they can still use the one that they made and finish it off with Mix's makeover. And so she finally lives her dreams of painting a moon, and it is beautifully painted. So they place it on top of the ride and it's ready to function. So they ride it themselves and it works perfectly. So with that, I think this was just fine as well. But I am satisfied with the storyline with Mix living out her dreams. So at least something that was really intriguing to watch unfold. Next episode, the crew raises the runway. Okay, now we are going to an episode where they're renovating something that they previously built but adding more tweaks to it. But it begins with the pups on their way back to the barkyard only to encounter some barriers in front of it for some reason, but they're able to move it out of the way, and then Crane and Gravel quickly dash over them to let them know something's up, which is the fact that a deer has appeared in the barkyard who is interacting with Motor, and Wheeler, being the legend he is, has to make the joke of like saying "oh dear," but they're amazed by the sight of one. And then Rose makes her way to the barkyard, who lets them know that the deer's name is Buttons. So then she guides the pups, who bring Buttons along, and they arrive at the airport where Buttons' mother is on the other side of the runway. Wow, it was that simple. But then when the little deer is about to reunite with her mom, there's an oncoming plane approaching the runway that prevents her from crossing it, which scares her and prevents her from continuing. We're just like, okay, you can't cross it at the moment, but you do have the chance to at least pass by since there's no plane coming at the moment. Like, have a little bit of logic here. And also, the runway's not even that long. Like, you could remain on the grass area that would lead around the runway. Like, seriously, there's a lot of ways to just adjust to the situation instead of making it a lot difficult in this spot. Like, whatever. But anyways, back to the main point. The pups get the idea to raise the runway. So they have Motor smash the current runway on the surface, and then they get the supplies and materials they need to suspend the runway a bit higher, and in that way it can allow wild animals to cross underneath it. So after they build it, they also do some paint work over it and they're done. But unbeknownst to them, Camilla is on her way down with a plane, and the runway's paintwork has not dried yet. So Rubble tries to warn her, but the signal just cuts off, so the pups need to think of a quick solution. And thanks to Wheeler using his vacuum, it gives the pups an idea that he can use that to dry off the paint faster, as well as adding more features on it to complete the runway. And so they do that, and they complete it in the nick of time just as Camilla makes her landing. So that thing's out of the way. And also Buttons, the baby deer, finally reunites with her mother, which was sweet, and that's it. I mean, I don't have any personal hate towards that episode, but I do feel like there was a lot of things that didn't really make sense. Like the whole thing with bringing Buttons back to her mother just felt ridiculous, as there could have been ways that a construction solution didn't need to be implemented. Like they could have just went around the airport like this and that. Like I see this background and there is leeway. Like they could have taken that approach. But you know, the upside of this is that at least there's more of a shortcut. So I get on that front. But I think logistically there could have been things done more efficiently if there was actually more proper observations. So to the next episode, where it's called The Crew Builds a Giant Skateboard. Interesting one, alright. It begins with them making their way to the skate park, where they watch On Crane and River skateboard around there and do some cool tricks. But much to their dismay, no one is watching. So they approach the pups for some ideas, and the pups conceive an idea that they should build a supersized version of a skateboard, because the sight of that can become an attraction to many citizens around town. So the pups make their way to the barkyard and build this giant skateboard. So then they bring it to River and On Crane, and they are amazed by it. So then the pups have other plans, and they go to Wheeler's truck to grab some chains. And while they're doing so, River and Crane decide to take some selfies together on the giant skateboard, because I guess they wanted to look cool. But jumping onto the giant skateboard would be proven to be a pretty bad mistake, because then those skates start rolling, and now two of them are basically rolling away. So this time I think the fault is actually on the two of them, since they didn't wait it out for a bit. So I guess their incompetence has led to this mess, and the pups witness what happened as always and are now on pursuit. It's like we haven't seen a storyline this occur like billions of times. But anyways, as always, the victims are rolling around town, and the pups try their best to stop their skateboard, like using ramps, but that had no help in it at all. It's only then until the pups figure that they could just create a giant shoe made of concrete and then drop it on the giant skateboard in order to get it to stop, because that's how you stop a regular skateboard as well. So they get to work making it alongside doing some paint work on it too. And once the giant skateboard passes by, they time their dropping on it perfectly, which stops the skateboard from rolling any further and saves River and Crane from getting ejected off in it instead. leading right onto the giant chute. So that is some great safety measures there. But with the sight of the giant chute on the giant skateboard, it has a really good artifact feeling to it that everyone decides to have it as a monument at the skate park. So that way it can attract more people to check out the place and watch other skateboarders do some cool tricks, which is definitely a great appeal to River and on Crane. So that is great. But anyways, I'm just like fine with this episode, but I feel like we're just seeing this storyline with the pups going in pursuit over and over and over again. Like there really isn't much new to them to like a significant degree. Got nothing else to say after this. Let's just move on to another Christmas related episode, this time being a special too, so we're definitely in for a ride. But this episode is called The Crew Makes Christmas Magical. So this special episode starts off with the pups helping out decorate a Christmas tree. And then they get a call from Santa Claus, who invites the pups over because he needs their help. So they make their way back to the barkyard to let Crane, Gravel, and Motor know that Santa invited them to help him out at the North Pole, which they get ready and make their way there through their vehicles. But unbeknownst to them, Speedmeister was overhearing yet again. And this time, wanting to try and finally be the hero, he decides to follow where the pups are going as well. So anyways, the pups finally arrive at the North Pole, and out comes Santa, giving the pups some nice Christmas cookies to snack on. And then after that, Santa goes and shows off his reindeers to the pups. And then the crew started constructing a workshop building so that way they can build the toys. And while they're doing so, they're being spied on by Speedmeister because this nitwit can't leave them the heck alone. Anyways, the pups are done with that, and then they spend the next hours building the toy, which the day reaches to dawn, and they filled up enough toys inside Santa's sack. Meanwhile, we have Speedmeister, who has his own version of a Santa's sack and presents that he's trying to wrap, even though he does it in such a terrible way. So then he's done, and he gets McTurtle to carry it as they make their way towards the North Pole, where they pass by Santa's reindeers. Oh dear. Knowing what Speedmeister is capable of, this is not a good sign. And what do you know? After the pups are done with everything ready for Santa to deliver the presents, Santa breaks the news to them that his reindeers are missing. So the pups opt to help out. And that doesn't take long when you have Speedmeister trying to connect the reindeers to his vehicle, only for McTurtle to fail to, and accidentally activating the reindeers to start flying around. And that is when Speedmeister is caught by Santa and the pups. Speedmeister, you freaking moron! Oh, for goodness sakes, and he doesn't do anything to fix all of this and just leaves the North Pole unfeathered. So with that, Santa is disappointed because now no longer having his reindeers for the night, there's no way that they can guide his sleigh so he can deliver the presents for everyone he needs to give them to. The pups try to offer ways to help out, even though there really isn't much that they could do in this spot. But then they have the idea that they could be the reindeers for Santa Claus. But the problem is with what Charger points out is that they are pups. Pups don't fly. I mean, if you had some of Skye's gear with you, then there'll be something. But anyways, they conceive a plan that they can build some mini operating machines that can glide, which will help lift Santa's sleigh up in the air. And to make things easier, they already built some like conveyor belts, which hey, why not use it like a treadmill and add on to the machine since they would be treading along the way. There's some convenience right there. So they built the thing alongside adding some tweaks to Santa's sleigh so it can work alongside their new machine. So they get to building and they're successful in getting their work done. Now it all matters on if it's gonna function. So the pups each get in their spots and start treading, which the Christmas magic starts working on them. So there is some progress, but they just need to start reaching the sky. And you do get a big help by someone unexpected, Speedmeister. Wow, what a way for him to redeem himself. But yeah, now Santa and the pups have made their way to the sky, and the pups tread their way to Builder's Cove, where they pass by the Christmas tree from earlier, where most of the citizens are sitting around waiting for presents. And what do you know? Santa's passing by and drops off the presents towards everyone who's there, and they all grab it, and the pups continue guiding Santa in the sky. That right there concludes this Christmas special. Okay, that definitely was something magical and very unique. It's cool to see the pups take the position as the reindeers to guide a sleigh that night. And you know what? I might as well talk about Speedmeister because I've been outspoken how much I hate him, but I felt like this was a nice change of character in a way, where I guess he finally got his heroic moment that he's been craving for. So I begrudgingly have to give him that credit. But outside of that, yeah, a pretty decent Christmas episode. Alright, next up we have the crew builds a post office. And it begins with Rubble just at Omar's house helping out sort out some things. And then when he makes his way outside, he meets with a guy who looks similar to Omar, which confuses him at first, only for Omar to introduce him to his twin, Romar. And even Omar's kids meet their uncle, and then Everyone heads back inside to deal with Omar's side, which is basically a bunch of packages that are falling on nuts. There's way too much as well. So Rubble offers to help out, build a post office, so he alongside his cousins arrive at an empty space to build this building. Okay, but the place that they're building it is right next to a tree that we see are full of squirrels, not just one like we saw before, now like 3. So yeah, after the complete, which is always the usual, Omar and his twin arrive and Charger is startled at the sight of 2 Omars, only for the man to correct him. Like really. But anyways, everyone makes their way into the building, which has not actually been complete yet. So the twin brothers head out to get more stuff for the post office, leaving the pups to deal with sorting things out inside. And that's when we have those 3 squirrels make their way into the office because they were attracted by the boxes that were full of nuts, which I mean squirrels likes nuts. And then when they try to move one of the boxes, obviously they get noticed. And when the pups uncover them, we know they love chasing squirrels, so there is temptation for them. But unfortunately, they just give in and start chasing them even outside and circling around a tree. But anyways, they give up and are exhausted, so they're just gonna finish off the job inside the office. Only then the squirrels return to try and steal the nuts, which the pups quickly spot, and this time they don't even give in to the temptation or even show any expression of it whatsoever. Instead, they're just trying to stop the squirrels from taking away the boxes of nuts. So we get a little brief like action sequence that ends with the pups having to put all the boxes inside a chest so that it prevents the squirrels from getting access to it. So those little animals just leave in distraught, just as the twin brothers arrive back with more stuff. It's where things get back to business, where the pups outline an idea of building a dispenser where they could put the packages in. So they construct it, and when they test it out with some of the mail packages, it works. So that's great. And we see the squirrels trying to get their hands on the boxes, only to not do it, which they feel saddened by. And the even twins take note of this. But thankfully, Rubble and his crew had a solution for them as well. And that is a tiny mailbox full of nuts outside, which was just for the squirrels. So that was at least sweet of them. But anyways, everything's done with. And they all make their way to Omar's house where they dance. Like that was it. But yeah, anyways, this episode was just fine. I just think the storyline kind of got standardized by the whole squirrel thing, which is what we have seen previously before. So nothing really new here. Outside of like an introduction to Omar's twin Romar. So that was something. Alright, going forward to an episode where it describes the crew building an animal wash. Oh, I guess things are going to be messy this episode. So it begins with them at the farm where there's an upcoming event Zoe is hosting that regards to jam. The pups are there and Zoe's farm animals who need to stay extra clean. And even the tiniest dirt has to be scrubbed off, with Wheeler notices when he sees his buddy Truffles with a bit of mud on her nose, so he scrubs it off. But then Zoe points out that her vehicle is full of mud, so the pups take it to the car wash to get it cleaned. And when they return back with her new clean vehicle, they are not ready for what ensued. A mess of jam, and it's all thanks to the farm animals getting into one. So now all of them are full of jam, and it's pretty sticky too, because that's obviously the science there. So Wheeler tries to attempt to scrub it off, even though it clearly wasn't going to work as his sponge got stuck for a bit. So they're definitely going to need some alternative ways to really clean these farm animals, and the pups have the idea that they could try and use the car wash, just converting it for a bit so it can accommodate for animal washing. So they do just that, adding on some more features so that way animals can wash through that place too. And after they're done, they invite Zoe and her farm animals to come over. And there seems to be no problem at first. We have the first few animals like Truffles and the chickens go through, but then Marina the cow is a lot more hesitant because that's a common problem with her over just such little things. But everyone is trying their best to persuade her to go in. But then they figure an idea, because she is a dancing cow. They can try and give a little disco feeling inside the animal wash so that it can convince her to go in. And what do you know, that disco feeling worked, and she happily dances her way into the washer. So it scrubs up all the jam off of her, and now she's clean too. With that, all the animals are neat, and they arrive back at the farm where the jam event takes place. So that was a nice resolution to all of this. So yeah, an interesting episode. I do find it fascinating when the pups have to like do some somewhat modifications to previous things that they built. So that does get pretty riveting, and honestly that works well with this episode as well. And now to our next episode, titled The Crew Builds a Winter Wonderland. And it begins with the pups just having fun playing in snow at their home, with them in particular building snowmen, or I could just say pups that resemble them, especially when they place their own construction hats on them. And then after that, they get a call from the tower, and that call comes from Carl, who is at the beach trying to run his smoothie shop business, but he can't get there because there's a snowbank in the way. So the crew makes their way there and removed all the snow there so Carl can access his shop again. But there's a little issue. Because of the snow weather, it's basically ruined the ride there, so no one is going to even be appearing around that area. And because of that, there's no way Carl can sell anything. However, the pups always will find a way, and their solution is that they could try and construct a variety of fun activities that involve the snow so it can help pertain to the circumstances. And for Carl's sake, instead of selling smoothies which are cold, he shall make hot chocolate instead because they're more of a warm-up treat, especially in the cold weather. Time to make a little reverse thanks to the temperature. So the crew gets their supplies and, as always, build what they need to build. And some of the activities they build is actually one that they made before, where we have the sled ramp and the ice rink, which is a fascinating callback to their respective episodes when they were originally built. And so what they would describe the Winter Wonderland being finally built, they tried to make the announcement to this town, but no one seemed to be drawn to it. And with no one really knowing the existence of this place, it could be null and void. However, the pups always have a way, and their idea is to try illuminating the place to give it a lot more of a gorgeous aesthetic. So they use Christmas lights because that's perfectly suited for winter, and after they set up the lights, they light up the place, and especially at night, it finally attracts the citizens over to check it out, and they will respectively participate in the activities available there, like sledding, skating, and even making snow-related stuff. Like now, the Winter Wonderland was a huge success, and the pups are fed hot chocolate by Carl, like he said he would make. So after that, the pups themselves and Carl participate in the fun of the Wonderland. So yeah, well, I think it's really sophisticated. Definitely another way of honing into the theme of adjusting yourselves to the situation, because there is some fun in snow as well. And the pups are able to make some great use of them with their buildings, so citizens can enjoy the snow as well. To the next episode, which is called The Crew Built a Giant Snow Squirrely Whirly. Okay, we're getting our superhero squirrel themed episode. So it starts off with Mix and Motor, as we know, are the biggest super fans of the Squirrely Whirly show, so they're pumped and full of energy to watch it and make their way up the tower for the screening of it, which now the Super Squirrel's mission for the viewers is requesting them to make an art project of her. And considering Mix is a longtime creative pup, this is definitely in her alley. So she's absolutely psyched to get this art project going. And her initial plan is to create a statue of Super Squirrel. So she and Motor make their way down to the ground level, which they happen to bump into Wheeler, Rubble, and Charger along the way. And they inform them about the upcoming project they're about to build, which excites them as well. But Wheeler has to point out that that day it's going to be snowing. So the pups try to get the supplies as quick as possible to get the project going. So they gather the supplies that they currently have, but it's still not enough to create one big statue, so Rubble opts to try and get Camilla to deliver more, which unfortunately by the time he calls her, the snowflakes start dropping down, and we just have Rubble humorously acknowledging the amount of snow that's about to come, and then cuts to him being half buried in the snow, which wow, you literally stood there for the entire time just to make that comment. But anyways, the pups are disappointed that now, because of the snow, they're unable to build a giant squirrel project. However, just like last episode, they decide to make good use of the snow for what it values, and that Mix has the idea that they could just create the project again, but make it out of snow. And considering there's loads of them around the barkyard, there's plenty enough that can make it to the giant level. So the pups get around to constructing the giant snow squirrel, and Motor and Mix start off with the head, and once they're done, Motor's at the top of it, just smoothing things out before Mix calls around to help the others build the body. And when she slides down, she accidentally leaves her rubber duck on top of the head, so I wonder what relevance it's gonna have. But anyways, the other got the body done, and all they need is to place the head on top of it, and they do. So with that, the giant super squirrel made of snow is complete, and it's wonderful looking. So Mix gets her tablet out and photographs it to send to the super squirrel. And then after that, Motor starts to look for her rubber duck since it's nowhere to be found. And just as the others offer to help her out, they get a call from the tower, and it's from none other than Super Squirrel, who is actually getting in touch with the pups, which greatly excites Mix and Motor the most. She admires the pups' work for their snow project, and then acknowledges liking the little yellow piece on top of it, believing is a nice touch to it. And that's when the pups realize that that's where Motor's duck was located. So now the pups have to find a way to get it down without damaging the project that they made. So for once in a while, they're going to solve it by not using construction solution, instead a more heroic approach, which is what Mix and Motor are going to do. So the two of them bravely climb on the back of the snow squirrel's cape, and although it is really steep when they get to the higher level of it, they do try their efforts to get up. But then there's a point where Motor slips and slides back down, but Mix is right behind him and will catch her in case she falls again. So the girls continue going up, and of course we have to have this dramatic moment of Motor's paw reaching the top of the squirrel's head to really emphasize on the accomplishment the two made. So they retrieve the rubber duck and slide back down on the cape, which gives the pups an idea that they can have some fun sliding down the snow swirl escape, and they do it for lots of times, which is their way of ending this episode. I think it was somewhat compelling, with everything going on, like the storyline with Mix and Motor building an art project for their superhero idol, and then these unexpected issues hitting them left, right, center, but they're able to adapt to the situation and still get their goals complete, which does make the storyline very sophisticated too. Anyways, we jump forward to another episode, which is titled The Crew Builds a Hotel. Wow, you finally make one. But anyway, it starts off with them at Zoe's farm, and then she gets a visit from someone she's related to, Hadley, who is her cousin. So he gets a nice introduction to the pups and then the farm animals, but then this is where we run into an issue. Hadley unfortunately has some allergy when he's around farm animals because he's gonna sneeze, which that's really unfortunate. So then that's when the pups decide to help him out and plan on constructing a hotel, which he does approve of. So the pups and Hadley arrive at an empty spot where they get around to constructing this hotel, which ends up being pretty huge. And Hadley approves the smell of the flowers that are there, so that's neat. But then Zoe pays a visit to the hotel, which unfortunately, she accidentally brought her farm animals along the way because anywhere she goes, they're just gonna follow along, which that's really bad for Hadley's sakes, which means that he'll have less of time to hang out with his cousin if these farm animals are just gonna continue making his allergies grow, which he does feel distraught by. But as always, the pups will come up with a solution, and their idea is to make a neighboring hotel that suits for the animals. So they get around to building it, and they construct the correct materials that suit for each animal's desires. So that's dealt with, and Hadley feels so much happier with what the pups did and is appreciative of their work. And he feels like it was really special to him, so that was good. But anyways, for my thoughts on this episode, it's another one that's just fine. I like meeting new characters, so Hadley is among one of them. But it's kind of funny how it kind of parallels to the Rubble Crew as a whole because cousins, I guess. But also, one nitpick I want to make is that we never really got to see the interior inside the hotel. Instead, we just meandered about outside of it for the episode, which that alone is a bit of a shame. But you know what, in the context of now season 3 just airing, there was thankfully an episode featuring the interior of the hotel, which is a beauty. But yeah, for this individual episode alone, just fine, but not much elsewhere going on for it. Alright, this episode is called The Crew Builds a Hiking Trail, and it starts off with Mix getting a package that has the kind of paint that she always wanted, a sparkling purple color. So then, they're called to the tower, and it's from the mayor, who lets them know that it's Mr. Ducky's birthday. Okay. But the plan is to have that duck celebrate his birthday on top of the mountains, where the two would skydive down, where all the party guests would be there to give him the surprise. So the pups promise to be there because they know what they're doing. So anyway, they arrive at the valley of the mountain, where they're then met with Rose, who's also joining in for the party. But the problem here is the fact that there are a multitude of paths that could lead to the top of the mountain, and it's unknown which one is the right one. So the best bet to avoid this confusion is to make signs, because obviously, and that excites Mix the most because then she can paint the signs as well with her new sparkle paints. So there's something that you can make good use of. So they create the first sign, and when Mix paints it over with her new paint, it catches the eye of Wingsy the eagle. Wow, we haven't seen her in a while, but knowing her history, there's something that's not going to go right. Anyways, the crew continues building signs periodically along the trail, and while they're ahead, the party guests have arrived at the valley as well, so now they're making their way up the trail with the help of a sign. So then with the pups, when they build their next sign, Mix takes a moment to admire a color of purple flowers that she believes matches with the color of her sparkly paint. And guess what? As she says so, Wingsy comes and snatches the paint away. Wow. So they try to chase after her, but after a pursuit, they do lose sight of her because, she's flying. But that's also not good for the guests who are following the signs, where they would finally reach the one that's blank. So that prevented them from continuing into the right path. So anyways, the pups and Rose return back to the blank sign, with Mix expressing a lot of distraught for the loss of her sparkly paint. Just then, with a bit of Charger's indirect slip up of a solution, it gives everyone the idea that Mix could just use the purple flowers to paint the rest of the sign, which is interesting science there. So they collect enough purple flowers to put it in Mix's mixer, and with some water that Charger pours in, she's able to spray the same kind of paint on the sign. So now he can continue their journey. And when they finally reach the top with the last sign put, Rubble calls over the guests who happen to make their way back down to the start. So now they make their way back up and now into the right direction. And just as they arrive at the top of the mountain, Rainwater and Ducky skydive and make their landing just as everyone gives the duck the surprise. And he's amazed by it, with Rainwater even pointing out that there was a little bit of assistance thanks to a purple circle, which the pups have no idea about, until she points at a purple nest that clearly belongs to Wingsy, which confirms why she took that purple paint, because she wanted to have a makeover with her nest, which in a way also helped the situation for Greatway as well. So yeah. But anyways, before moving on, let's briefly talk about this episode. It's just decent, but to be honest, I don't really have this episode sticking out to me as much. So with that, let's just move on. Anyways, our next episode is known as The Crew Built a Kangaroo Safari. Okay, so we have Lily and Lucas visiting the pup, where they have Wheeler reading a book about big animals to them, which Wheeler points out that obviously they can take pictures of them if they're ever spotted, which Lucas happens to have a camera and takes a quick photo of Wheeler and Lily, who make silly faces. But anyways, the page they first read on is about animals in Australia, like kangaroos is the most notable, which interests Lily and Lucas, who want to see an actual one. And then it seemed like couldn't be the case when they spot something bouncing behind the cargo. When they investigate, it was only rubble just bouncing around on a jackhammer. But anyways, it does give the pups an idea of creating a kangaroo safari. So they go ahead and create it using some cardboard cutouts for the landscape and then some mechanical kangaroos with springs underneath them. And when they're complete, it looks very well stylized, I can say. But Lily then makes a suggestion that she wants to see the springs under the kangaroos actually function so it can have a little bit more accuracy. So then with the help of the jackhammer that Rubble used earlier, it gives them an idea that they could just use that to put in the machine. But then just as the crew are near complete drilling it in, Charger gets too excited, which the commotion of his energy causes the jackhammer to function, which since the kangaroo machine's on top of it, it causes it to bounce off of its stand and bounce around the bar car before basically bouncing out of its zone and into the streets. So guess what? We're gonna have another sequence involving something like this that we have seen billions of times. So anyways, that thing just bounces around the wild where the crew is on pursuit and passes by some of their animal friends before they're finally able to corner the bouncing machine when it is crossing over the wildlife bridge, with Rubble using his vehicle's razor blade to stop it from bouncing any further, which stems from it deactivating the jackhammer as well, so that's no longer functioning. So hey, Rubble is being hailed a hero, but also, the wildlife seems to love the appearance of these kangaroo machines. So with the pups seeing this, they add in the other two on the wildlife bridge, and now the kangaroos can be a scenic monument, which attracts a lot of the animals, which is what Lucas is able to snap a lot of photos of. So that was cool, but yeah, just the typical average episode that just continues off a repeated storyline of pursuing something that rolls around the scope of the city. Anyways, to the next episode, which is called The Crew Plays in the Construction Games. Okay, we're having some sort of event in relation to construction. But yeah, so the setting takes place in the outdoor library where the crew and Grandpa Gravel are gathered around a table reading a book about the construction games. And next thing you know, we're sitting on a table right next to them and eavesdrops on the story that they're reading. And hearing how much is a competition, and it also involves a special trophy that the winner will earn, which is literally a golden hammer. So then that's when Speedmeister reveals himself to have been eavesdropping and now challenges the pups to an actual construction games in Builder's Cove, which they do accept. Yet hey, why not have a competition? And two, no offense, but I think this was going to be an easy win for them because we all know Speedmeister just sucks at everything. Anyways, the scene cuts to the pups and Speedmeister warming up to compete in the first ever construction games, with some citizens spectating as well. And guess what? The golden hammer is up for grabs, so it's definitely one exciting competition. So before the first challenge, Mix recommends the idea that if the pups were to win, they would give away the trophy to Grandpa Gravel, which that's really sweet. So then now the challenge commences with Mix going up against Speedmeister, and for some reason, which no one noticing, Speedmeister would sabotage Mix, which would cost her the round despite how bad Speedmeister's performance was too. Gosh darn it, Mix. But anyways, next round is drilling in nails, which is now Wheeler and Charger going up against Speedmeister, and the two pups get a pretty big lead while Speedmeister is just flopping every single time, not even drilling in the nails properly. But then when he notices the pups pulling ahead, he tries to find a distraction using a squirrel because pups love to chase it, and it does seem to work at first with Wheeler and Charger chasing after a squirrel, but luckily for them, the squirrel got away just as they spot Speedmeister near complete his part, so they quickly dash over to finish up their part, and they're able to just sweep right through it, much to Speedmeister's shock. Yet the pups won this round, and in your face, Speedmeister, even after distracting them, you still ended up taking the L. So now is the final round, which is Rubble Rubble up against Speedmeister in jackhammering. And while Rubble is successful, Speedmeister's jackhammer goes wild and starts causing a mess around town. And then the catastrophe happens. He crashes straight into the gold hammer, completely denting it. And then, as always, Speedmeister would just slip out what he was doing, which the pups would point out that it's not fair, which they are correct on that part, which I don't know why no one was paying attention to what Speedmeister was doing. But anyways, that jerk leaves, and the pups feel distraught that they weren't able to give Grandpa a nice trophy if they won, which Gravel was touched by and appreciative of what his grandkids were doing, but points out that playing the construction games is not really about getting the trophy, it's more so about the fun you embrace from it. Where the pups are touched by these inspiring words, but you know what, they can feel like more of a winner if they can do the most important job of fixing up the mess that Speedmeister made around town, and they do so. So with that, the Builders Cove community is fixed and they return back to Grandpa Gravel, who's just moving around the dented golden hammer, and the pups cheer together. And before the episode ends off, we do have a funny visual of Speedmeister attempting to get his hands on the gold hammer, only for the pups to shoo him off. Okay, this was an interesting episode. I like competitions. I mean, coming from someone who's currently watching a lot of reality TV. So this kind of stuff is in my book. And it was satisfying to see all this hubris Speedmeister was just embracing just implode in his face as he tries many ways in such unfair fashion to earn himself the win. Which thankfully, he didn't win. Anyways, to the next episode. And guess what? We got another crossover episode like I hoped for. And yes, my prediction was right. It is exactly in the order which pup is popular. So between Rocky and Zuma, obviously I guess fans liked Rocky more, so here he is. But the episode begins with the pups finishing putting together a crib in honor of a newborn baby bear. Just then, a vehicle arrives in the backyard, and the pup who was operating it is a familiar face, Rocky, who's obviously come and visited Rubble. So he is introduced to his cousins. I mean, yes, he already had met Charger because Charger visited Adventure Bay once, but hey, he got to meet Wheeler, who is actually a big fan of his, which is pretty blatant just because Rocky and Wheeler have something in common with keeping things clean. So then the pups get a call from the tower, and it's from Rose, who does request them for a construction solution, and they take some time to think before Mix comes up with an idea, which unbeknownst to the pups, Speedmeister was spying and snuck in so he can steal their ideas to build his own version of what they're constructing. Which again is going to be the norm with these crossover episodes because this guy always has to appear. But anyways, the pups are ready to make their way to the forest, and Rocky even expresses his excitement to work with the Rubble and crew, which him and Wheeler are really jovial about it. So then when the pups arrive with the supplies they need, Rose meets up with them and alerts them about Speedmeister's version of the build, which is obviously unstable as always, and it falls apart so quickly that it damages the bears' homes, which causes them to flee, and they almost have one of the debris fall on them, but thankfully Rocky stopped it. And then for Speedmeister, he obviously fell off, but Rubble used his razor blade to save his life. And of course, Speedmeister has no hesitation to just leave the scene without taking any sort of accountability, and without the mess that he left behind, the pups now have to tidy up. But this is what appeals both Wheeler and Rocky because they like everything to be clean. So to get around to clean up all the debris off the ground. And after all of that, Rose would come dashing towards them to let them know that there was an emergency in the fact that the pair has now gotten separated from its child. And what do you know, when we cut back to Speedmeister just making his way through the forest, he spots the baby bear and gives the pups a call to let him know that he found it. And knowing that Speedmeister is an irresponsible person, they know that they need to quickly find out where he and the baby bear, whose name is Fuzzy by the way, is at. And then what do you know, Fuzzy makes his way onto a log, which then Speedmeister and McTurtle climb on as well. And because he was hanging off the edge of a hill, it tips forward and starts sliding all three of them down. And they make their way into water, which then we cut to the pups who just happen to make it to the area where Speedmeister had just parked his vehicle, and also the last place where he made his call to the pups. Next thing you know, he makes another call to them and tells the pups that he, Fuzzy, and McTurtle are on a flog floating in the middle of the sea. So everyone makes their way to shore, and the pups construct their own boat so they can drift their way into the sea as well. And after that, at this point, this is where the specials just starts to slow down heavily because there isn't pretty much anything elsewhere to do besides the pups having to rescue the three on the log, because that's obviously what's going to happen. And they do so despite some struggles that was clearly just there to make some red herrings. But anyways, Fuzzy makes his way to rest inside a little area on the boat that the pups made. So then they arrive back ashore, whereas we see Speedmeister leave in the background while the pups meet with Rose again, where they then see the monitor bear approaching the shore. So everyone takes a moment to stay out of sight just the mother bear and Fuzzy to have a nice reunion with each other, which they do. But then as they are about to make their way back through the forest, the commotion with the wind frightens them, so they dash over to the little area in the boat to hide out, which is reasonable after the traumatizing experience they had when Speedrinder's tower came crashing down on them. But seeing how that little area can act as the bear's new home, it gave the pups the most innovative idea to literally create an entire island just dedicated to the bears. So in that way they are separated from the dangers of the forest and in an area that they feel safe, but also featuring a bridge that connects them to the land if they want to leave and explore for a bit. So with that plan being outlined, the pups get to work, where lo and behold, they did in fact literally build an island for these adorable bears alongside that bridge, and also there's a feature of some cameras so citizens from Builder's Cove can watch these adorable bears. So yeah, the work here is pretty much done. But we also have Speedmaster trying to spy on the bears himself as well, using a telescope, and we do humorously have McTurtle jump scare him. So at least there's karma for him. But anyways, Rocky was glad to help out Rubble and his crew, and he joined in with them for the waggle and wag. So what are my thoughts on this crossover episode? Slightly better than the Skye one, that's for sure. But I feel like it's just on par with most of the episodes of season 2, just fine on its own right, but not really something that excels to like such pinnacle, because it just doesn't reach that. There was some slow points in this episode that kind of took away a lot of my enjoyment from it. But I did like Rocky and Wheeler's fun dynamic, because obviously they have a lot in common with their auras. So we did get some adorable interactions with the two. And you know what? I hope to one day pray that the main franchise will finally have an episode where Wheeler visits Adventure Bay. Take notes. Alright, onwards to the crew builds a rooftop stage, and it begins with the pups giving Wheeler a special gift, which is a tool organizer, because this legend always keeps his things organized, so he's happy about it. But now it comes to where he's gonna place it. He can't put it in front of his home nor in the back because there's obstacles involved. So he spots that there's an empty space on the roof of some, so he places his gift onto the roof. So then after that, the pups get a call from the tower, and it comes from Gabrielle, who's having a special day about bananas happening at his store. And he's also accompanied by his daughter Sierra, whom of course Charger is always going to have his excitement for. But then the two request for the pups' health because there is a problem. And when they arrive there, they understand what the problem is the fact that Sierra's stage is blocking her dad's door entrance, which for some reason, I don't even know why they even put it there, but whatever. So the pups are asked to move it. And this is where we get to probably one of the most ridiculous and, in my opinion, probably the most dumbest sequence, where the pups will just move it to various places that I feel like are just so stupid to even put them there. Like first they place Sierra's stage in front of the car wash, which is like, why? And then next they try to go for the park, which, okay, it is less egregious, but you do need to remember that bunnies are occupying that place because you made a mini golf there. And then they try the beach, which is like, okay, if you hadn't made those rides earlier, then it would have been a good place. But no, since you now built them, their commotions is in the way. So pretty much Sierra is starting to give up. But then after some time, the pups configure the solution where they first must move back to Gabrielle's store, where obviously they can't place the stage anywhere around the building, but the rooftop is available, so they can place the stage onto the rooftop, which this isn't a good idea, but also they should have reflected on it after what Wheeler did earlier, and so they wouldn't have to go through that monotonous sequence. Furthermore, on top of the idea of having the stage on the rooftop, it also means that Sierra can perform for the citizens as they're getting bananas from her father. So that adds a great aspect to all of this, and the pups get to work in making sure that is the case, and as always, they succeeded. And also at the same time, they built some cutouts that illustrate the bananas so it can promote the special banana day to the citizens. And after that, citizens gather around Gabriel's store as he starts his banana day event alongside with his daughter performing for everyone, which was nice. And to end off the episode, he gives the pups some banana related treats for them to enjoy on. But now here's where it comes down to what I think about the episode. Oh no, I didn't click with this one. And for the most part, I feel like the dumb sequence with placing the stage at the most random places was just a way to stretch out the episode, but overall just made the characters come off as stupid in that spot, which I don't like, because I find these characters very fascinating, and I do watch to see how they grow as characters, but this episode really just dumbed down their qualities, and from that, I just did not really like that aspect of this episode. Okay, we jump forward to the crew fixes the lighthouse. Oh dear, what's gonna happen? But anyways, it begins with fixing up Gabrielle's door hinges, which is what they believe the last job for the day. So now they can relax and hang out with Rose for the night to look at some beautiful stars. So then as they leave, yet again Speedmeister has to be present and expresses his jealousy that he can't even get any sort of praise whatsoever. But then he comes up with a brilliant plan, whatever, good luck keeping that together. Anyways, the pups join Rose for the night looking at some stars, which they have a really nice visual to it, but then their moment of peace is ruined by a large light beam that shows a symbol of Speedmeister's face on it, which no, he's ugly. No one wants to see that over some beautiful stars. So although it doesn't seem like a problem at first, that's when Rubble gets a call from Camilla, who is operating a boat trying to guide her way through the sea, and she was using the lighthouse, but now because of Speedmeister's face on it, it's causing some issues for her. So now the pups are making their way to the lighthouse, and we do find out, yes, of course, Speedmeister was the culprit of this, just painting a picture of his face on the lighthouse lenses. So then he just makes his way to the surface where the pups confront him, which they know it was him, but then he just leaves like that, leaving it up to the pups to find a solution. So as they make their way through the lighthouse, which also was boarded up initially, but you know Speedmeister's pea-brain can't really make sure it's secure. So anyways, Wheeler tries to do the honors of scrubbing off the thick paint on the light, but he only ends up smudging it, which funnily ruins Speedmeister's face on it too, which I personally think perfectly represents his character well. And since the light is now beaming down, citizens would just see it and laugh, much to his horror, even his turtle pet too. But yeah, because they can't really scrub off the paint on there, they have no choice but to replace the light, which thankfully they get it done quick thanks to Ancrane supplying them the new light, and now the light in the lighthouse works again, which is also now able to guide Camilla back to the right direction and arrive on shore, where she makes her delivery of a crate of dog treats, which obviously excites Rubble, who then snacks on it as they rejoin Rose to watch the stars. Okay, but yeah, just another pretty fine episode. I just think Wheeler gave kind of the best indirect karma to Speedmeister, so hey, what a legend. Anyways, got nothing else, let's go for the next episode. So in this episode, it describes an interesting concept of building a solar-powered bus. Okay, we'll see about that. And so we have Wheeler showing off his new solar-powered tablet, which interesting. And then they all get a call from Sierra, who's going to perform that night at the top of the mountains. But obviously she needs those fans to be there. And it is a long trip, so there's the idea that they could have a bus get all the Sierra fans to get to the concert. Which, why didn't you have transit to begin with? Of course, incompetence. But anyways, they built a bus station with nice mesmerizing colors painted on the glass to represent Sierra, and Camilla delivers the bus to the station alongside explaining to them that it's an electric bus, so it does require charging. Which is kind of pop culture-y like, because obviously we're now familiar with these electric cars needing to be charged like a device. But anyways, guess what? Speedmeister, of course, is the one willing to bring trouble, and he impulsively hijacks the bus without recognizing that it's not even fully charged. So then as the pups are away building the bus shelters for the citizens to wait at, they return back to the station to find the bus missing, and during that time, Speedmaster has already drove through the heart of the city, passing by bus stops with citizens waiting because this guy's freaking selfish. And then when it almost reaches the top of the mountain, the battery finally runs out, so all the power is off the bus and it rolls back down. We're the same way where he literally came from. And boom, he rolls back to the station and almost crashes into the bus charging stand, but Rubble stops him just before he could do it. But then the bus gets power again, and Speedmaster impulsively reverses right into the stand, destroying it and then fleeing the scene afterwards. So now the bus can't get powered up to go to the concert. What a disaster. So now the pups plan on calling all the citizens to let them know what happened. And as Wheeler hands over his solar-powered tablet, which Charger points out doesn't need any sort of charging, Mix gets the idea that they could work something out like that with the bus. They just need solar panels, which you better get it quick because it's turning dawn. So they quickly are supplied the solar panels, which they apply on top of the bus, and boom, it is charged up. So now they can get the job done. Get all the passengers who need to get to the concert, and they make their way to the top of the mountain where Sierra can finally perform in front of them. And you want to add some more amusement slash, let's say, karma. Sierra will be at the end of her performance just as Speedmaster finally arrives, which that's why your tacks never work. Just like your brain. Oh wait, no, you don't have one. Anyways, I think I had a bit of fun with this episode, mostly from the science with the impact of the solar from the sun. So that was a pretty unique concept. Although it was disastrous, I like how the show kind of decided, you know what, let's just let the catastrophe occur since we had too much close calls and it got really predictable. So they did something a bit groundbreaking this episode, which I like that aspect. And now I finally have reached the last episode of season 2. Let's hope this finale was worthwhile. So anyways, this episode about them building a lifeguard tower, and it starts off with them waking up prepped to go to the beach for the day. Yeah, we haven't had much of a proper beach episode yet, so this is definitely a different sort of feeling. So they arrive there and start playing frisbee with Karima. And they also play in other beach activities, but then at a point, Motor would drop her rubber duck into the sea, which causes it to float away. And when the pups gather around Karima, that's when Motor begins to find out that her rubber duck toy is not with her, and although trying to retrace steps, it's nowhere to be in sight. So, with Karima also taking the role as like the lifeguard, the pups conceive a cool idea to build a lifeguard tower for Karima so she can try and look through the premise a bit better. And so they build her one, but then periodically Karima suggests them to build more levels so that way she can have a variety of angles. And when she gets to the top level, the sunlight was in her eyes, so the crew builds a roof cover so she can see better, as well as building a slide so that way she don't have to climb up and down needlessly. She can just slide down and save some of her energy. So now Karima can try and look around, and she finally spots Motor's duck floating in the sea. So she quickly acts and gets on a surfboard to paddle her way to retrieve the rubber toy, and although she loses grip of it at first, but she is able to get it and return it back to Motor. So they all fist pump because they worked well as a team and they continue playing the frisbee game together. So that culminates everything of season 2 right there. But for this individual episode, it's just alright. But there was just some blatant filler with the construction process because they just needed to stretch out time a bit. I do like how innovative they did with the lifeguard tower, where they built more layers to it so that way the angle can be a bit better for Karima's perspective. So yeah, good teamwork, but just an alright episode by the end of it. So that's my review of every episode for the show, but before I wrap this video up, I have to do this semi-ranking where I list out the episodes I believe are the best and worst from this season, because this makes things a lot more interesting. So let's obviously start off on the positive side. The episode I personally think is the best from the season, well, at this point, I don't really have the most definitive answer, but based on what I am assessing, I'm just gonna pick the crew built motor as Playspace, one of the first few episodes of the season, which is telling why the quality of the season. But yeah, I personally love it and enjoy it, and there was a lot of intrigue and suspense throughout. And I may come off as biased because Wheeler is my favorite character, and seeing him earn a star at the end was so pleasing to watch, so that may factor into why I look at this episode with high regards. But you know, other factors is the fact that this one's a lot more memorable from this season than most other episodes. So this is why I rate this episode as the best from season 2. So then to the worst, I mean, I'm surprised it was a difficult choice as well, because there was a plethora of episodes I could choose from, whether they were just fine or mid. But for me, just one episode that I was just reviewing on not too long ago that really just made me annoyed, and that was the rooftop stage. Yeah, I felt like this episode just really watered down the character's qualities, and that made me really flustered. I mean, I do like the comedy and some of the comical nature of the show tries to embrace, but I feel like this one was just a bit too hammy at points and made everyone just look like they had no idea what they were doing. Like, if you're gonna move a stage, you don't just put it in front of places that would obviously cause a disturbance, which is not hard to figure that out or even outline beforehand. So in essence of all of this episode, I just think this one was the one that I had a hard time really connecting with, and that is an indictment on its overall storyline in this episode. But yeah, that's it for my Rubble Crew Season 2 review. Which, like I said, the quality show is no different than Season 1, with its very stable writing and just its overtly rudimentary style that just doesn't really make the show hit that mark. And although I'm happy with the animation changes this season encompassed, which, like I said, was the right show from the producers, I still don't think most of what was done this season made things any better. And in my opinion, on this individual season, it felt like one that just slowly started going downhill, around maybe a quarter into it, just because most of the episodes just came off mid or just not super significant in my eyes. So that is a knock against season 2 as a whole, but you know, that is just Rubble Crew for you. But anyways, I am still going to continue covering the show with the 3rd season that is currently airing right now as I'm getting this out. And I'll see where the show's trajectory goes from here. But with that, I appreciate you all tuning in to this review, and I'll see y'all in the next video.